That's what we do. The things we say. Not allowed on YouTube. Reality's ours. Reality's ours. We might be retards. Reality's ours.
That's right. It's time for another episode of Reality's Ours with your hosts, Nate and Thomas the Paranoid Motherfucking American. This show is full of highly opinionated, offensive, and outright degenerate commentary. Proceed at your own risk, and welcome to the Reality Czars.
Hey, girl.
And we're live. Welcome, everybody. This is the Reality Czars podcast, and we're hosts tonight, Nate and Thomas, the Paranoid Motherfucking American.
And tonight, it's the motherfucking brother-sucking American.
Hell yeah.
Still time, I guess, yeah.
So we have two wonderful guests with us. We have Dr. Narco Longo, and he's somewhere. And
This
we
is Dr.
have
Longo's office space, which is
Dr.
actually
Longo's office space.
interesting.
Yes. Man, he's got a lot of books back there.
I know, right? It's like a sacred, like, cathedral of the mind. Which is
Honestly,
nothing
I'm a
but-
little jealous, dude. I can't afford that many books. I have to pirate them. I have to steal them online and stuff. And we have a great Andreas Curtis with us.
Don't criticize his bourgeoisie book tendencies. The man's a materialist. I like it. Yeah. All right, it's true. I am Andreas. Hello. Something with the reggae music just throws in some discordia. You know, I like that. It's a vibe.
Yeah, dude. We had to have a little ska to get us started. And then I got a little, I do have a little reggae in the background. It's a nice little background.
There's also
So
like a
tonight,
Spanish,
unfortunately,
like folk music one, and we have a Southern like Baptist gospel one that just doesn't have a video for yet, but it like brought a tear to my eye. It's like a really powerful like movie scene.
And I sent you the Bock Saga full file if you want to hear the death metal Bock Saga, which I made for Andy originally, but unfortunately Andy's not here right now. But at one point we were talking about the Bock Saga, and Andy said, like we're also about AI. Is like, what can AI not do or do? And this is like months and months ago when people still thought there were limits to the capacity of AI. So we're like deathcore, death metal, Bock Saga, and I still feel like it's one of the more true songs about the Bock. Baby got
dude,
Bock.
I mean, it's super fucking fitting being Finnish, being like Norwegian, or not Norwegian, but Scandinavian, like death metal. Like it's perfect. It's a fantastic song.
It is the superior Bock song.
Don't cry. I like your British rap version too. I like there's like 3 or 4 like good. There's room for more Bock.
Mine was a very specific reason though. It just repeats the same thing over and over, and it was for a commercial that sold the Bock Saga wetback.
Eeyore is self-sucking in his grave right now. At the thought of you guys defiling his wonderful saga with
Imagine defiling
AI, demonic AI filth.
I don't know, man.
From your mom's basement. So
he's like, I had this beautiful story about a goat and a woman that were drunk together, and then you ruined it with technology. That's what he's.
I just gotta say, I asked, and I know Michelle is not the same as Eeyore, but Michelle Merle, I asked him very explicitly, what would Ior Bock feel about me making AI-generated music that made fun of the Bock Saga, that did not pay attention to the alphabet or any of like the deep esoteric stuff. It just made fun of the icky part of doing the thing, and he was like, he would have loved it, like we all joked, so I felt vindicated that it might not be like defiling Bock. Maybe he's laughing about it, maybe he loves it.
Yes, no, I agree, I'm only teasing. Yeah, that
he
sense
looked
of
like
humor.
a happy man.
Capricorn of the gesture of the zodiac, for sure.
There's definitely a concern with lack of criticism. I feel like AI has the potential to be misused the same way as education, right? Like mainstream pop culture. Like people during Bock's time would have thought everything he was saying was antithetical to everything they were taught in school, right? And I think that for the most part, you could choose to either try to dig through that and try to find out more about it, or you could just reject it all and say, oh, well, I mean, this doesn't add up to the things I was taught as a 5-year-old, so I'll leave it be. And I think that's going to be a major change with technology, is people deciding whether they're going to just procedurally watch Seinfeld or use it to think new thoughts, right? And to collaborate with something that helps think in ways that they maybe. The other thing is, AI is not necessarily as forbidden as other people. AI is forbidden to have certain thoughts, but so many people are so much more afraid to say things these days than AI, right?
Well,
and Bock
Can I posit too that AI, in a very literal way, and not like in a straining way, that it's kind of like a digital version of this like autofellatio, where like you're generating content made specifically for you. You're putting your energy into this content, and then only you are consuming it, and you're not even necessarily concerned about like mass, reproduction of it. You're just kind of like, and I feel that it's almost the digital version of this. It's like a digital offering.
Yeah, I'm more worried about people, having their whole YouTube script written for them, and you can't tell me there's not a drop in quality of content. Like, we can all make someone laugh with AI, but can you move someone with it? I'm not convinced, and in fact, I'm pretty hostile towards the whole practice.
The beauty is that you won't know until after it's happened, when you're like, oh, that had so much heart. There's no way. And you're like, oh, it's 100% AI did it? What about, oh, it's 100%. Okay. And then it's like, now what do? You unlike the thing that you just liked?
That some of the photos that Thomas has come up with of sexy Hillary Clinton have moved
don't show any of those
made
again.
me sexually attracted to Hillary Clinton. Only in the AI form. But I got to say, I was fully moved. And there was a move. It moved. So I have to say that there is something to that.
My mom's watching this episode, by the way. Hey, Mom.
I'm trying to remember. There is a guy in Australia who has over 1 million videos on YouTube, and they're all like, they're not quite AI generated. They just they're procedurally generated. They have a Python script, finds a question on YouTube that somebody has, answers the question on YouTube, and he has like 5 or 6 different intro videos of himself saying like, hey, welcome to my channel. There's, the next video is going to answer a question that, it's going to show you a solution to a question or a problem that you might have. And just like, he just puts it together, and he's got millions of videos, right?
I love that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, the quality of that's definitely gone down because it's nothing to it, but it's also got all the answers. It's like the channel is nothing but answers, right? So, I mean,
and let's be real. I mean, how much of this is just Pakistani kids in a warehouse? Like, every time I've seen AI artwork, the faces are still fucked up, the fingers are still fucked up. It's like someone with Down syndrome is trying to create art.
Hands and faces are okay now.
Impaired.
The thing is, like, things like hands and faces, like, every time there's something wrong with AI, tomorrow it's fixed and it's getting better and better every day. What you're seeing is the worst it'll ever be. Yesterday is done. Today is the worst it'll ever be. Tomorrow will be better. It's like that every single day. And having said that, I like Pakistani kids, and I want them to do more work, not just AI. So I don't know if that was. I definitely would like AI, and I definitely want Pakistani kids to make art. I feel like Pakistani kids are probably pretty interesting. You gotta wonder what it's like to live in Pakistan. Like,
did you find like a small village that you politically align with, and just hire the kids in that village to do your games, knowing that you might actually have some kind of a sway in the region?
That sounds like a cool, because the alternative is some rich dude in Pakistan who can afford to drink and pay off cops, right? Because they've got the same problems that we have, in terms of, in fact, maybe worse, maybe just the same. I mean, there are definitely exploitation issues going on there too. So if they don't have to do that and they can do what they want to do, like, that could be cool.
Yeah, AI is Yahweh backwards, and it's pure demonic filth. It's like worse. It's worse than pornography. It's intellectual pornography.
But AI backwards, don't the Jews read right to left? So doesn't that if it's backwards, it might be.
Yeah.
Maybe we're.
I don't know. I mean, the hardest part of getting anything done with AI, of course, is the slipperiness of all the lotion stuck on your fingers. I mean, that's the biggest threat to the AI community right now. Is
I think you might be onto something.
the Strala of light coming through your mom's basement. when we're asking AI questions. Is
That's how Apple's gonna move ahead again with Siri, because it'll be hands free. You're right.
Yeah, AI is just a cheapening of everything, and it's like people think they're going to program computers to write symphonies and all this, and no, it's just going to water things down ultimately.
A bunch of people are asking why Juan's not here. It's because Juan is literally going to end up getting a divorce if he spends one more night with a bunch of dudes talking about Bock Saga instead of spending it with his family. And like I have that on high authority. That's not even a joke. So that's the main reason Juan's not here.
Yeah, but I want to talk about the homunculus.
Yeah, he's pulled that card like 3 or 4 times, and now it's like starting to get old.
His poor wife probably has to dress up like a homunculus half the time.
We were supposed to talk about the Bock Saga.
Yeah, it's the only thing that can get him in the zone anymore.
Dude, he's got like a bed jar. Yeah, I can see it. But the Bock Saga, earlier we were talking about this thing that I did a video. We were talking about Mormons and all that stuff, and Paranoid American's doing Monday Mormon streams. I'm doing some Latter-day Wave stuff. Nate's talked to some Gnostic Mormons. And there's a kind of thing that's interesting. Like, they read the Bible more, I think, than other people, it seems like, is a stereotype. And they found things you don't really notice, like the Lord, the Messiah is the king of serpents. And there's the goat and the scapegoat. And, like, Christ is the goat. Which is, like, you don't think of Christ as the goat. Unless you're, like, Knights Templar. You don't usually think of Christ as the Baphomet of the story. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that it's, like, in the Bible as a goat, and the relationship with scapegoat, and then to Bock Saga, right? Because this idea that the Christ is the goat, I mean, could you find a more, like, not even metaphorical but literal evidence of the Bock Saga? That's wild.
Can I touch on that, Andreas? That's a really good point. I was flipping through pictures of goats today, and I hope we're gonna give a brief overview here a little bit, maybe bring some people up to speed. But just for now, to your point about the goat and Jesus, I'm an astrotheologer. Everyone knows there's astrotheology in the Bible. I'm not, that's not new to anyone, really.
These ancient dudes were looking at stars. They were thinking about metaphysics and astronomy, of course.
I'll pray for your souls after this is over.
Let me tell you about the goat. Is that Capricorn? Jesus. Now, this isn't in the Bible, but Jesus was a Capricorn, according to solar, folk mythology throughout time. Now, the point about him being Alpha and Omega, Ram and the fish, Aries and Pisces. Well, in the sign of Capricorn, we find the half goat, half fish.
Wow.
And many would argue that the goat is no more than a ram suited for a different, climate.
There's a thing with the Hebrew, the ram and the goat and the unicorn with the yeah.
So according to some, the glyph for Capricorn comes from the fact that the goat is actually a ram with some more kind of serpentine qualities infused in there, and that's where it gets its maybe its darker associations too. And
that's interesting, because just the fact that people would, if you were to explain to a novice layman on the street, like, hey, goat, serpent, I think that's shocking and weird. But if you think about it from all the mythological symbolism, like especially Capricorn, people are focusing far more on astronomy than on what month it is. Like, that's the reason they care what month it is because they believe that harvest and weather, stars are all connected. So yeah, it's perfect. But yeah, maybe we should explain. Go ahead, but I want to say we should explain a bit about the Bock Saga for novices too.
And Jesus was the sacrifice of all sacrifices, thus making him the scapegoat of humanity.
Right.
And really is a goat in quality, birthday. Mythologically speaking, it's undeniable. He's associated with the goat, the eternal goat myth.
Yeah, I'll pull up the thing here, Nate, if it's okay. I'll pull up a screen here.
Here we go.
In the Bible, talking about Azazel, this sort of both place and like luminary lore, like realm and personage, right? That is Azazel. And during Yom Kippur, you send the goat to be an exchange of sacrifice, right? And so in the Bible, there's this idea of there's two kid goats, right? There's a scapegoat, and there's like one that's given to the like one that's like for the Lord and one that's for the devil, essentially, right? And that's super reductionist because the devil's not even the right term. But this idea that there's two, and then it's translated wrong because in the Bible it's shown in like the NIV and JFK is like that, like they'll give two goats, like one for this and one for that. But in the Hebrew, it's actually one as this and one as that. So the goat is representing Christ. One goat is representing Christ, and the other goat is representing the alternative to Christ, whatever that is. Right?
Wonderful. Also, anytime you're going to talk about human trafficking and worshiping Satan going hand in hand, you know, just not to go down another rabbit hole, but why do we call it kidnapping? After all, it is goat hunting, you could say. Kidnapping is goat hunting.
I guess the screams would sound similar.
Well, there's another aspect to that, which is like fox hunting and goat hunting. The way it was is that you chase the goat out until it's exhausted, and you're constantly making noise and terrifying it until it hides, and then you chase it out of its hiding spot. And you do this all day until the goat or the fox, because the British eventually use foxes, is so terrified and exhausted it gives up. It's like, fine, I don't know what else to do. Just kill me. And it's just so frazzle dripped that it's so filled with adrenaline, right? Like that's the whole point of that kill.
Not slow burn.
Yeah. But okay, so because I don't know, we know about the Bock Saga. We've been talking about it for months. Maybe it's worth explaining for anyone who's tuning in who's new at this.
We
what
got some folks in the comment asking. Yeah.
They're like, wait,
I want to just suggest, like, I guess out of the four of us, I don't know who the expert is. I would almost lean towards Longo as being like kind of the Bock Saga expert, and I would like to maybe just follow up and fill in the gaps.
Samesies.
That's an honor. You know, that's high praise, man. Appreciate it. But you know, there's definitely some people who wouldn't like me to be, you know, the authority.
Well, I'm
a Christian. I'm a flat earther. You know, all this stuff. But I'll try and do it justice.
Right.
The Bock Saga is how I've summed it up before. Is a Finnish perspective on Atlantis, and Atlantis is really the big myth that every occultist kind of tries to toss their hat into the bucket for, right? And it's an explanation not only of a creation story for mankind, the origin story of mankind, it's also an explanation for the origin of the alphabet. It's an explanation for the movement of people around the ancient times that you see blonde, blue hair. You see notions of Aryanism or, you know, Hyperborean tales, these mythical lands from the north people came from. There's a thread that runs throughout most ancient mythologies and of these people from elsewhere, often with beards. The Bock Saga explains why the beards are so important. Why is the word God? We can all argue about who God is, but does anyone argue about why we use the word God, meaning goat, to apply to any such candidate for God? Well, this all goes back to the Bock Saga. Why the goat is so demonized in today's society, especially, you know, superstitions, negative superstitions with the goat. So the Bock Saga, basically, you know, you have to mention Ior Bock is the man behind the Bock Saga. And according to Ior Bock, who, you know, we have to acknowledge was really the only expert living witness, you know, gave a testament of the Bock Saga. Ior Bock was a Finnish mystic and a tour guide who claimed to have the original story of mankind. Not only that, he claimed to have this authority and access to such a tale because he belonged to the highest, most ranking, most royal family on the planet. Now, you might not have heard of their family, but all the royals in the adjacent countries recognize this to be true. Now, that's not just according to him, that's people that he grew up with. He had access to the King of Sweden at any time he wished, if I'm not mistaken, and other things that validate his claims like that. He was selected to be the tour guide of perhaps Finland's greatest, military fortress that they kind of bring tourists in to come see. So he wasn't just some crackhead on the street claiming stuff, as he's sometimes portrayed to be. Ior Bock was a yogi, you could call him too. He made pilgrimages back and forth between India, and he started to spread this story that he says was instructed to him since birth ultimately, but his rigorous daily exercise began around 7 years old when he started engaging in a strict yoga regimen, we'll call it for now. And he began receiving an oral tradition. So what this ultimately is an oral tradition from Finland, from Swedish-speaking Finns who claimed to speak what they call a root language. And so this whole story goes back to how humanity was created, how humanity began to speak that root language, how that root language was spread around the world. And I think that's about as much as I can throw out at once. I think
there's some things I would throw in there, like, okay, if that were all it was, then it would have probably been boring and no one would have noticed it or whatever. The fact that what he did was connected to so many shocking things, like there's all these evidences in other cultures and other sects, Gnostic traditions, secret societies that had Mithra cults that had been doing the same thing as him, and no one understood the reason. And all of a sudden he's like, well, this is why this is at. It's actually not that weird. It seems way weirder if you're uninitiated, but like for instance, a naked person sitting to a Puritan, like a Christian who has to cover themselves because they believe in the Garden of Eden, all that stuff. A naked person seems out of place. But in India, in ancient India, and in Finland, in ancient Finland, like this tradition of Shiva and Odin and Digambara, where you're naked, is actually like the most modest thing you can do. So there's also like a cultural change that's happening. And there's some people that are saying, well, I don't really know what's right or wrong. I have my culture's understanding of it, especially in the 70s. And so they're like, well, maybe we should hear out Ior Bock more and we should understand what he's talking about. And unfortunately, I think because he was the only guy at this point in time that was able to do these things, it was a lot of burden for one person. And so I think it made him, it usually does make you kind of crazy to like know so much and to try to help so many people. So there's a convolution there as well as you become like a 70-year-old man, what we're trying to find. But at the end of the day, as I look into the Bock Saga more and more, the things that I think of as shocking or weird or whatever, they're just examples of Tantra or examples of ancient practices. And it's really interesting that this guy knows all of these things one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I'm really sad that Andy couldn't be here. So everybody, Andy is recovering from something, so he couldn't be here tonight. I also want to give a big shout out to my buddy Will Blunderfield. He was going to be here tonight as well, but he's getting over a cold. He's a really interesting guy. He's a yogi himself. He's kind of a like a health instructor, like kind of like
is that double
coach.
soul shaman.
Double soul shaman, yeah. Shout out Double Soul Shaman.
No, Double Soul Shaman was going to be here tonight.
Yep. I invited him tonight. He's still recovering from a sickness. because I wanted him to give some cultural context with some of this stuff, because what we are going to get into are some of the more controversial aspects of the Bock Saga that are going to probably freak some people out. But like, I thought that Will Blunderfield, or Double Soul Shaman, would kind of give some more context with some of the ancient practices and some of the cultural stuff that other civilizations have done from time to time that seem very homosexual and freaky to us. That is maybe normal. Like, I have my own Christian baggage that freaked me out about that stuff.
Bro, what a man and another man and a midget and a donkey do together with a woman is totally their own business.
Well,
Yeah,
I
dude,
think that the intro that Longo and Andreas just gave is the one that I had heard before, and it's incredibly succinct. But then the version that I got, and I guess I'll retell the very short version when I went and read through the Carl Borgen's book, is that the Bock Saga is that a goat bangs an ape. They produce 2 human children. The boy at age 7, neither of them have any language. They don't know what letters look like. They don't really have any way to communicate or spread knowledge. The boy at 7 years old finds out he can suck his own dick. And once he sucks his own dick and drinks his own cum, he spontaneously understands the alphabet. He understands how language works. He then has his sister ingest his semen, and now she knows how the alphabet works.
Which is
And
basically
from there,
the movie Blue Lagoon. It's not that weird.
yeah, it's exactly the movie Blue Lagoon. You should check in the comments down below for a link to that. But that's the really premise of all of it, and because of this act of autofellatio and sucking yourself off and gaining knowledge from it, since that was the original spark of human intellect and communication and culture, that is like this highly coveted aspect that needs to be present in all forms. Every single little aspect of the Bock Saga, from the start to the finish, has to represent that core, foundational element. And it's weird that people, it took a while. Like, I heard about Bock Saga for years, and then when I actually read the book, I was like, wait, is this the same thing that everyone's been talking about, the alphabet and the zodiac, and like, oh, you take this root word, what about that part, man? What about... So anyways, that was my introduction to Bock Saga.
I'd like the first chance to respond to that, if that's all right. Yeah, that's kind of the soft disclosure that comes along with it, because there are things that are downright disgusting in the Bock Saga. That's coming from an admirer of it. Now, I'll tell you what the worth in the Bock Saga is. And you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to practice it, right? But there are questions that have not been answered. And they are some of the most crucial questions, right? Why are the Greeks, why are these people, that people in ancient times depicted in situations of bestiality and homoeroticism and things like this? Are these the same people who built the wonderful buildings and wrote the wonderful scriptures and all this stuff? Well, man, basically, so you've got all this gay shit on the walls in the ancient temples and stuff, and it's jarring to people today.
And by the way, can we just remind Christians that Lot's daughters got him drunk and raped him, or the Ham, or I could go on if you want, like, horrible things in the Bible. There's a whole thing about what happens if you spill your seed in the Bible. God kills you if you spill your seed.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So Zertus, the core value of the Bock Saga is that your precious bodily fluids are the most important thing in the world, and that not only does our very reproduction depend on it, but there is a psycho-spiritual quality to these fluids. Whether you're a tantric, practitioner or not, there are people who do that, and the evil people who rule the world are engaged in some degree of this stuff. Now, there's plenty of good people who do it too, but you should be informed a little bit on it.
Right, and
Now,
evil people are gonna think that it doesn't matter what you think about it. They don't care if you think it's bad or good. They don't care. And if they can convince you that something is disgusting, bad, or shocking, and you won't do it, then it keeps it a monopoly for them.
Yeah. This
They get to
music-
keep all that yummy stuff.
this music's not my scene, man.
Baby got Bock.
We're just
I
pushing
can't-
through it.
Okay, I'll lower it. Sorry. There we go.
That's all right. Yeah, I can't think with that.
Sorry about that.
That's
We
all
had a
right.
super chat, and somebody asked us to switch that to the background music. So
We don't have to
Yeah.
do it forever. I'm glad. I think we got a whole playthrough. So
So here,
back to the game.
this is the point that needs to be understood. In this previous system, sexual fluids were prized beyond belief. Now, you might not like all the weird stuff they may have been doing, but they did not have, gender confusion. They did not have these scandalous crimes, throughout the world. And the main thing with the Bock Saga is this needs to be understood, everyone. In ancient times, there was a system of white magic that ruled the world. White magic. Sexual fluids is what the world ran off of. Today, we live in black magic. I've flipped through about as many black magic, dark grimoire books you can, okay? I've come to the conclusion that blood magic is black magic. There's no black magic without blood, and there's no blood magic that isn't black magic, unless it's menstrual blood. But that's a whole nother controversy. Blood magic is black magic. White magic uses life-giving fluids.
And this is anthropologically what they're. If you read any of these books, that's the way it works in these books.
Now,
Well,
the
does
Bock,
this include the Black Mass and the unholy Eucharist?
those are not black magic. Aleister Crowley denounced black magic. You'd know that if you read.
Well, Catherine de
just
Medici, I think,
books.
predates Aleister Crowley, and she's the one that I think has the first documented version of the unholy
Not-
Eucharist, which is where
Well,
they put bodily fluids on an actual Eucharist in an inversion of the Roman Catholic Mass.
Well, that's evil. You can use bodily fluids for evil. Don't get me wrong. But
Is that
Aleister
evil, though?
Crowley-
Because if that's knowledge, what would be evil about spreading knowledge if there's no blood involved?
You sound like a serpent.
Well, okay, hang on. Let me finish my thought here. Okay, the Bock Saga explains how and when the world switched from a white magic golden age to a black magic, blood magic, terrifying Iron Age, Copper Age, Bronze Age, whatever you want to call it. Okay, man went back to the Stone Age. Not necessarily in technology, but in morality. Okay? Whether it was the Ice Age, we're going to be talking about the Ice Age. That's also probably the biggest element we haven't brought up here is the Ice Age and the Atlantis. But this is
And the
the fertility. This is the fertility element. The
Yeah.
fertility. Why did every ancient society have fertility cults? Why were they obsessed with fertility? The Bock Saga gives us the answers. That's the value in it. And it, like I said, it shows us where and when the whole world switched to largely being ran off blood magic. And today, you've got people in the streets who will walk past a cabaret ritual in Brooklyn where chickens are being slaughtered and they won't bat an eye. But if people are copulating in the streets, which I'm not always in support of,
With chickens?
they'll call the police, the humans. Now, here's my other point. The Bock Saga stresses this point immensely. We live in a twisted society. You may not like the disgusting sex stuff. That's okay. It's not my cup of tea either. Now, Tantra's a whole, universe to go explore, and most of it is charlatanism and just, BS.
But there's clearly also some weird metaphor because the goat and the ape, there's something beyond just the sick part. That's all I'm saying. It's clearly deeper than that.
Yes. I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sorry. I'm the worst.
That's okay. What was I saying?
Well, you're getting into the not being a fan of the icky sex stuff.
The blood magic and the animal stuff and...
There was dudes fucking chicken.
No, whatever.
Like
Oh yeah, okay. Here. This is what's wrong to society, and this is what can stress the, it's the crucial element of the Bock Saga. What it's trying to impart on people. And tell me if I'm wrong here. And I've grown up hunting. I've grown up killing. I believe in self-defense. I'm no pacifist. I'm no leftist sex freak. But hear me out on this. We live in a world today where you can walk down the street and you'll see a gunfight on TV. I like my guns. Don't get me wrong. You can walk down the street today and walk by every bar in town, and there'll be a shootout on the screen. There'll be a war scene. There'll be a torture scene. There might even be a rape scene in half of your favorite movies. They might be my favorite movies too. But here's what's wrong. If you saw lovemaking on a TV in a public place, the police would be called instantly. Instantly. In a decent place, at least. And I'm not saying those people are wrong for doing so, but our morals have been flipped. You can walk by and see violence on a television, and people are unaffected. No, not a glance. You can see blood pouring out of an eye socket. No one cares. No one bats an eye. So that is the shift that we're addressing here tonight. And you might think it's well okay to see guns on TV. I like guns. I like them in my home. I like them on my hip. I don't need them firing off in my sports bar when I'm trying to eat. So that's the culture switch that we're addressing here. And it might be weird, but they were more innocent. They were more responsible. They loved humanity. They loved nature. And there's no weird kink to any of this. There's no weird kink. The people who have kinks like this today are suffering from maybe some ancient past life memory. Not my problem. I don't condone any weird fucking nasty sex stuff, but none of this has that kink element to it. None of it has that taboo element. When they were doing these things, they weren't getting off on it like in a dirty way. It was an everyday part of life.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents, and
Yeah.
there you go. I feel like
I have to throw a quick devil's advocate in, just the violence versus sex, the way that I've understood it in my Rockefeller brainwashed, version, but that you can prevent a 7-year-old kid from getting his hands on a gun. You can't prevent them from getting their hands on their dick. So if you show them like how that thing works, now all of a sudden he's got a loaded rifle in his pocket all the time.
Someone needs to read Aldous Huxley, I think. But you can definitely keep your hands. You can destroy like if you hypersexualize.
Well, I mean, I drank saltpeter in the military. They give you that in basic, so I understand that you can sort of like chemically castrate.
But also, you can just like post-traumatic stress from hypersexualization and pornography from children is making them less sexual, and we're seeing that happen to this new generation of kids. Their association happened before sexuality with pornography, so they're confused and they're more interested in the pornography itself, which is a kind of voyeurism, like it's watching someone else do the act, which is leading. You can see like trending and cuckoldry, etc. There's all kinds of issues with this, and then connect that back to wartime when you raped the girl next door of your village in front of the village, so that they're demoralized. And you're doing this like the girl next door kind of pornography is the most popular kind of pornography. So it's designed to demoralize you and feel like, well, everyone around you has been. It's a post-war rape strategy to destroy people.
Do you think that the goat and the ape had any sort of sexual desire between the two of them?
Well, that was the thing I wanted.
No,
I wanted to really quickly say though. I think that we have to remember, like when people talk about the goat and the ape. I mean, again, we're talking about the goat might be Christ and the ape might be primordial man. You've heard the same story before in the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? This is the story of Gilgamesh, right? It's not that weird.
So,
but every other culture that I'm aware of and every other religion acknowledges sexual desire between people. And in Bock Saga, one of the things that makes no sense to me is that it's essentially one bloodline that gets to actually copulate at the end of all this, and the entire village essentially facilitates this, but that There's no concept of horny teenagers in the Bock Saga. For millions of years, there was no such thing.
I mean,
as,
there
like,
was
making eyes and go ahead.
Listen, there was a degree of restraint, but I've also definitely heard instances where the average Joe, who was not ranking, they still had tour friends. Every person on planet Earth had a tour friend.
But didn't even one person was like, I'd rather try that flavor over there. Like, I'm kind of sick of just having hot dogs.
No. See, now that's no. See, now that's morality. That's like
Really? Well, wouldn't you just say like, hey, I'd like to try an innie instead of an outie?
No, they were not polyamorous like that. Not love in that true sense. Like, they weren't. I can't speak as if I were there. But according, if I'm being true to kind of the tradition, what I've heard is they were disciplined.
And without the
this was a system.
See, I don't believe that, though.
They weren't hypersexualized.
Without all the systems of hypersexual repression that we've built in to make consumers want to buy sexual products, it won't exist, right? We have to imagine a world without all of this.
But I can't imagine that, because whatever caused that goat and that monkey, even if it was Christ and something else, whatever caused that desire.
If you go to India and then you can be naked in public because it's modest, right? Like,
right. Let's remove the sex part of it, though. Whatever the desire was for two things to come together and make a new thing, like that desire has to happen, even in ugly people.
Well, there's desire. Well, see, I think you're arguing against something that none of us, put forth, is that desire still existed. I'm just saying, what are you contending that one of us said they didn't have any desire at all?
Well, I'm just saying that one of them might have been like, hey, I'm sick of vanilla. I'd like to try chocolate over there at one point in their life. Just one person. After
yes. Yes. You got to remember, if this is an original system and an original family, you've got to think about crime statistics a little bit. Like, what do homogenous societies, what do we know about homogenous societies?
They typically kill each other over adultery and eye for an eye murder, and that's usually how they operate.
They have a lot less crime in general.
Well, and because of those two rules, though, those usually become very prevalent in long-term peaceful homogenous societies.
You're thinking of homogenous as in like Sweden when everyone was white. I'm not saying one partner. I'm saying
exactly. Like pygmy culture. There was a few that had been rumored to live in absolute peace for over 1,200 years until Western culture started seeping in, but the only things that kept them in line was that eye for an eye murder and adultery. So that, even in that, like the desire between sexual partners was like a core in keeping the peace.
Also, like Thomas, you have to think about the whole. We didn't even get into the ice thing yet, but Iceland, Helsinki, the whole idea that they're more isolated than that. So they're not really. There is a time when it makes more sense for them to be homogenous. And
what about every other animal on the planet that has a physiological sexual response to the opposite sex? Are you just?
Yeah, but what are you arguing? With all due respect, you're contending something that none of us put forward, and it's not really
let me state it and let me know if
they had desire. They were just disciplined. It was like having a wife for
there are
million years. Only one family is allowed to reproduce, and everyone else in the village does not.
That's not true. I already told you that's not true. They have, these people.
You've got your homie to jerk you off, but I'm saying that
they had ex friends too. They had a hetero friend, a partner, and every 1 year they would switch a hetero partner. Some of them. I'm not in support of that in today's society, but if you're fixating on them having multiple partners, some of them did, and it wasn't just the one family. Go back and read the book. I'd love to move on, but that's not.
I guess I don't know if I'm presenting it right here, but it's
Michael Rockefeller disappeared in South Papua New Guinea.
No, Thomas.
The desire for a man and a woman to make a child didn't exist for 50 million years outside of one family line.
I think what you're confusing is that only the royal family had the harems. Okay, like yes, the royalty had multiple partners, but the average people They weren't restricted to one partner their whole life. In fact, the Bock Saga, which I don't share this view, the Bock Saga puts forth that it's wrong for one woman to be with someone their whole life. Now, I think times have changed, and I would never support, female
Polygyny.
But
No,
wasn't it only the
polygyny's
highest
okay.
of the caste that were allowed to actually have children, and everyone in the lower castes were not allowed to?
Yes, they were not allowed to create
That's
children.
the part I have
yes.
a problem
No,
with.
you
I
don't
don't
see-
believe that you can prevent ugly poor people
Okay,
from
no.
banging.
Okay, but hang on. You just put me through the ringer here on something you confused.
Well, this is the offering.
No.
right?
Excuse me. I was talking. You just said copulating versus having a child. It's true that the lower class did not have the right to make children.
Okay, that's
but
what I have. To
they still had sexual partners.
Okay, let's ignore the copulation, the sexual gratification, the desire for a male in one species and a female to come together and make a child. I think it goes beyond like human. It's like in the limbic system that's deeper than what we can rationalize away. And that's what I have a problem is that for 50 million years, people were able to suppress what feels like the most fundamental urge of all mammals.
Listen, I don't know what you're contesting here.
I don't know how else I can explain it. I don't care about the sexual desire.
Reproduction
in the world.
But he's
two
saying,
animals.
What's the
Thomas,
issue that we
you're
can't
saying-
move past here? What's the issue
Thomas-
that we can't move
Thomas-
past here?
Thomas, you're
What's
saying-
the answer?
Thomas is
Are you
saying
asking?
Thomas is saying that he thinks that people still would, or that mammals would have still had the biological imperative to breed, and Longo is agreeing. He's saying they just didn't have harems, right?
Listen, they bred. Certain people bred, and just like you read Plato, and only 2,000 years ago, people were thinking a very similar way. This is not like revolutionary thing. Hey, the best cream of the crop of society is going to do most of the baby making. That's not revolutionary. That's not unique to the Bock Saga.
But the difference is that
Why
usually
fixate?
that's almost
There's so much more to talk through tonight. Are you just representing the skeptics here tonight?
I feel like this is a point of contention that I'm willing to put my heels in. If we want to move on, that's fine. But this is like the one.
Let's go.
Every
Let's
every
go.
generation has priests. Every generation has males incels. Every generation has women that don't breed. It's very common. It's part of humanity. It's not everyone who breeds. Some people have 12 kids. Some people have 0 kids.
Right, but we're not talking about 50 million years and entire societies. And here's the I guess the main point of contention is that all those other examples where it's been shown in other cultures, usually it's against the law. And either if you do that, you get in trouble for it, or they kill your baby, or it's like a eugenic system where they sterilize you and they actually enforce it that way. But the implication, as I understand it, is that Bock Saga is this weird utopian society where no one even had the desire to step outside the bounds. That people in the lower caste.
No, listen, you're actually maybe you should go read it a little better, or listen to the original espousers of it a little closer. There's a whole bunch of ways you're wrong, but if we look at the initial outcropping of what they call the more than, the extra children, there was an inherent deviation. Now you've got to remember, much of this is coming through this choke point of them being in the Ice Age, and according to them, there's only 50, as few as 50 people at one point, if not less. It was very easy to get everyone on the same page. Now, Paradise Times, that's way out there. That's like Adam and Eve type conditions. Paradise, we can debate that too, but let's debate the weather element, since we haven't brought it up at all. Under this trapped in the ice scenario, it would have been easy to get people on the same page. Okay.
I don't agree with that, but I'll submit to that for sake of conversation. But I've seen
what else were we talking
in
about?
a high stressing situation. It's not the easiest thing to get everyone on the same page.
I mean, also just like think about how sexuality works. It's driven by a puberty, which happens through hormonal responses. If those don't happen and trigger, we're seeing kids now, they're taking puberty hormone blockers and they're becoming asexual. Like it's totally plausible that people had different hormonal responses due to different environmental conditions, and that people live longer because they didn't. I mean, there's all sorts of different changes that happen in your epigenetic structure if you're not having puberty at the same time and you have the same hormones.
And
those
that's
hormones
just
extra,
to your point, Thomas. To your point about them not deviating, you're just. I mean, do I really have to contend that? Half of the story is that some of them didn't follow the script, had a couple extra kids, or the kids didn't want to come when they were supposed to. Those kids didn't want to be outside of the system and started having kids.
Right.
Are we just going to gloss? Are we just going to gloss over that your whole last premise ignores that whole part of the story?
My understanding is that only happened.
You want to debate here tonight?
And that it was whenever the Box Saga.
Oh, if you read the book, you wouldn't be spacing on this. Okay, if you read it as closely as you think, and you weren't just fixating on the coming part, okay, you would have seen that half of the story is how the deviation occurs. Yeah, the ones who are getting told you couldn't reproduce when you want went off and started a whole kingdom because they wanted to reproduce and have foreign wives. And so yes, part of a desire did bleed through.
I didn't skip over that part. If you watched my video of us,
we talk about the whole
page 1 to the so anyways to recount for that.
You know, it's just a whole nothing burger. You talk like 10 minutes about them not having desire, which none of us contested, and then you bring up the part about, you know, them never deviating when half the stories.
I disagree that it was a nothing burger, and I think you sidestepped the desire argument more than
there's no desire argument. What's the desire argument?
That two mammals in any species have a desire to make a new animal between them outside of sexual desire, that it's built into them,
which is why we have mules and why we have dolphins, but mules can't reproduce because they don't have the same promoter sequences in between their genetics, so they end up having a sterile mule that can't reproduce. I mean, this is common that we have that happen, and there's no second generation, right? It's impossible.
I'm willing to move on to that. I just want to make the point that the utopian pitch of Bock Saga is that, yeah, people deviated, and that was essentially the downfall of society, you know, at large. But that it's described that there was 50 million years before that of utopian times, and I just cannot fathom that for that long, poor people didn't.
Let's talk about it. I'll right here. We can sum it up. Prior to the fall and the change in the climate, whatever you want to call it, let's say there's golden age qualities, which is what the Bock Saga claims. Or golden age
utopia. No war, no fighting, no murder, no crime. None.
Well, we don't have an explicit claim that nothing bad ever happened, but I'm willing to debate you on those grounds that nothing bad even happened. Okay. Let's just say we have these golden age conditions, and there was a paradise around the world climatically. There was tropical paradise all around the world, mango banana as they claim. Now, in this setting, man was largely animal-like. Now, our separation from animal was the ability to speak, to write. We had the language, we had the root language. And then you also have fuck, man. Forgot what I was gonna say. Okay, man had astrology. That's clearly laid out in the Bock Saga, that astrology was one of the earliest implements of learning and determining the future, things like that. So what they do is they take the astrology, they notice the 7 stars, 7 wandering luminaries, and they model their society after this. They see a sun and a moon, boom, a man and a woman. They see the 7 wandering stars, or 5, you want to say, 5 added on to the 2. This is where you get your groupings of 7. They might have been looking at the Pleiades and got their grouping of 7. They might have been looking at, you know, the list goes on. They are modeling their society after the stars. You're arguing something that's way harder to conceptualize. What I'm telling you is exactly what they tell us. And when you look at modern native, not modern, ancient Native American culture, what do? As soon as man is kind of inching his way out of the Stone Age, he models his culture after the heavens. With architecture, with earthworks, this is what man does on impulse. Even if man were reverted back to a caveman, he would mirror the heavens. And in doing so, being endowed with logic and reason above the animals, it only seems logical and in accordance that he would soon arrange his family after the stars in the heavens. You'll notice this is why there's a detailed recurring grouping of 12 and 7. 12 and 7 in the Bock Saga. These are eternal astrological truths that are encoded into this story that give it veracity beyond its historical veracity.
Can it just be retrofitted though? Because he releases it in 84, so he's got the advantage of like everything that's ever been written and just saying, oh yeah, Bock Saga actually said that first, like 50 million years ago. So many people cite the Bock Saga as self-referential proof, just like the Bible, and I don't understand why like people will criticize the Bible and give the Bock Saga extra credit for this.
Well, I'll bet you know the Bible as little as you know the Bock Saga, with all due respect.
I mean, if every retort is just going to be an assumption on what I do or don't know, then this is very less productive than I was expecting, unfortunately.
Hey, I didn't think I was walking into a debate. You came over to my meetup. I met you. We were more than respectful.
Is this not? Are we not being respectful?
Of course, we're being respectful.
I feel like these are, dude. Like, how do you prevent ugly people from banging in the dark? I don't want to know why we keep sidestepping this question.
What's sidestepping?
Yeah, people are still.
I don't know what you're posing. I really don't know.
There's no question that
what you're posing. What's the disagreement? You're on this desire issue as if you posed me.
And you said you didn't, and then you complain if I go back to the same topic. So like,
field me a question.
Do we resolve this or do we move on?
Field me a question. Field me a question, and I'll answer it. Boom.
Okay. Were the lower castes allowed to, or did they by choice ever copulate with each other and create children in a lower caste?
Under the Bock Saga, you only had a baby when you had the right dream to do so. So these people weren't putting themselves forward to have a dream. They could have had sex. I would also wager that being astrologically endowed, okay, you can avoid pregnancy easy peasy. Maybe you've never heard of that, but using astrology, you can avoid pregnancy. This is actually some of modern man's, easiest to figure out astrology is, hey, when not to have sex with the moon.
Watching your cycles, yeah.
So this was intuitive. It would have been implemented in society right from the get-go.
Dang,
and
what if Saturn and the moon...
They could have avoided pregnancy. So boom, that's one, knockout blow to the assumption that just because they're having sex,
I disagree, man.
They're preventing kids.
I agree with Longo because as my mom's OBGYN, like cycles are very important. And so if cycles were different because of Saturn, then that would immediately change everything about the way.
And if they had unwanted children, they simply gave them a less desirable role in society, and those people would also be kept from reproducing. Now, this is also off my limited authority on the Bock Saga. I'm not an authority on the Bock Saga. I will defend it to naysayers, Freemasons, barbecue addicts and the like. But
there's plenty of evidence that even in the last few centuries, or millennia, like this is what's happened in many cultures. People that are oppressed and not allowed to breed. It's not just the priesthoods, but the priesthood's a great example. The Catholic Church will go in and turn an entire community into celibates on purpose so that they can displace them, right? So this is not just 50 million years ago. This is like recent. It's happening all the time. It's not
Thomas, you asked what did they do with the children, right? Did I answer that square enough?
No, not really.
You did.
No, you just didn't like the answer. I gave you a flat, straight, direct answer.
You didn't, my friend.
You said
what you're responding from this weird place of like a utopian society where everyone follows these rules. What if you're dumb and you don't understand the astrology? What if you make a mistake and you're like, shit, I thought today was the full moon, but now it's yesterday, so now we've got this kid to worry about. It feels like it's nonsense. It's silly, childish nonsense to believe about utopian anything.
Well, I think the idea that the world used to be more palatable.
What if you're just...
We have evidence the world used to be more palatable. We know that. We look at the world.
Right,
we can
but
see,
we don't have
we can-
evidence of utopian societies.
Well, I can show you evidence that people before the the Neolithic era, we're talking about long ago, had were at least a foot taller on average, lived decade longer at least. We have straight teeth. You'll never find an asymmetrical skull. Clearly, life was somehow better, right? And so we don't compare.
I don't think straight teeth means that ugly people don't bang in the dark.
I don't know if it means there might not even be ugly people at that point. You know, like we're talking
lower caste. I'm being facetious here, but anyone in the lower caste, I don't think that everyone would self-regulate to such an extent that this particular society and culture lasts long enough to turn into this like world religion legacy.
I mean, also you have 50 million years. I mean, years could be different based on our understanding of years. Like all this is subject to change based on what we understand a year to be, which has to do with cycles. Cycles could be quicker, you know, or shorter, right?
And what I'm familiar with, at least, is that they were isolated as fuck.
We're gonna move on, or what? We're gonna move on, or hey, we're gonna move on, or what?
Be happy with what I want to move on to, though.
Let's. I can't tell how much this is real or radio, but let's pretend it's
who
radio.
Who set this up? Was this Reality Czars?
This is actually we can blame this on Andy, who didn't show up.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Doctor. I wasn't meaning to have a crazy.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be.
Listen, Thomas, you came out to my meetup, which was a sweet gathering. Twan told me you pretty much never leave your house because you're just a fat loser Freemason. Basically,
that sounds like something Juan would say, to be honest.
If you didn't just want to listen and join, you should have just said, "Hey, we're going to be debating this," or you could have debated me in person. I think it's a little suspect. The first time I ever share the screen with you, you want to put the gloves on, but when I invite you to my meetup, you're all, "Hey man, thanks, lovey-dovey, showing face." You're just another fraud, fat, stupid Freemason.
I'm pretty sure there's
fucking loser. The chat agrees. You treated me disrespectfully here. We could have talked nicely. You told me I didn't answer your question. I answered your question square. You know it. You're roasted on camera. Let's move on. We can move on without him if we want.
I honestly think you're misunderstanding, though.
You're done. You're done.
Point out, I would. All right.
You're toast, man. Toast.
Mic drop and heard, but at the same time, I think there's a misunderstanding because as far as
I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Being a fat Freemason who never leaves his mom's house. I brought you to my meetup. I brought you to my meetup.
I showed up to be nice to Juan because
I introduced you to all the nice truthers in the state that you would have never met otherwise because you don't leave your fucking mom's house. Okay, roasted.
Well,
you want to talk Bock Saga or you want to debate?
You're not going to like the next thing I want to talk about.
Oh, let's get into it.
So warfare.
No, I'll face it. I'll face it head on. And by the way, what ticked me off is I'm a man of dignity. When someone says, "Answer my question direct," and I answer them direct, that's dignity. That's respect. You don't know the first thing about respect, you ugly fat Freemason, and that's a fact. It's objective, and I gave you the benefit of the doubt, and you spit it in my face. And if you want to be in front of my 50,000 subscribers, that's what you're gonna get. How's that for a jackpot?
Is this how you present respect? This is your version of respect?
This is respectful.
This is radio.
Absolutely, it is.
Okay, so next question: no warfare this entire time, and the military.
You're a Freemason, aren't you, Thomas?
I'm a 32nd degree Freemason. Yeah.
Yeah, you're 32,000 pounds overweight, and you're on the 32nd parallel of the wrong latitude. Okay. So get out of America. You're not a good American. You're too paranoid for my liking, and you're a fat loser Freemason. I'm having a field day. If you want to come in front of my 50,000 subscribers and pull the gloves on with me, you're going to look like a fucking fool walking through the door on the way out.
I appreciate it.
How am I doing, chat?
I'm pretty sure that Juan does. I'm pretty sure that Thomas likes the Bock Saga more than Juan does, and that there's a huge misunderstanding here. But I would understand why you would defend that way if that was the case. You give someone
the benefit of the doubt.
We'll give him a little more benefit of a doubt because I'm pretty sure.
I'm here to talk it out, but if he wants to pull the gloves on, we'll just go straight out. I don't do this passive aggressive BS. I don't do this sneering critiquing as if I'm some intellectual when you're really just some loser who never even read the book, obviously. And you tell me that I'm sidestepping Fuck you. You're hobble stepping. You're fat stepping. Ugh.
I feel like you can't really read a book and claim any sort of authority. You've got to suck your dick for 20 years. Is that not like the core essence of Bock Saga? That if you don't understand it over the course of 20 years, what kind of authority do you think you are?
You can be a Freemason for another 20 years, and you're not even going to get to suck the 33rd degree guy's dick because you're not making it anywhere up the ladder with that low of an IQ. That's why they haven't brought you into the gay shit.
That's a misunderstanding of Bock Saga because technically the king is the one.
Am I right or am I wrong? You haven't made it high enough in Freemasonry to do the gay shit. Yeah, you don't like that. Let's fixate on your ugly little cult's gay practices.
I mean, we can, but I thought this was about Bock Saga.
Yeah, no, you're a fucking Freemason who's out here to ridicule a beautiful, wonderful take on world mythology.
I got permission from Michelle Merle to make fun of the Bock Saga.
That's okay. I can make fun of the Bock Saga. You can't make fun of it because you don't know it. You're just ridiculing.
Nate, how you doing, Nate?
Sounds like
You're looking pretty good.
gatekeeping.
How's it going, Nate? How you doing, Nate?
So can we talk about how there was no warfare in utopian times too, and that the military existed, but that weapons did not exist, and that there was no like enforcement or capital punishment of any kind?
They existed. They were ceremonial, according to the story. You're also grilling us as if we're like adamant, or at least me. I mean, I'll speak for myself. You're grilling me as if I'm like a 1,000,000% proponent of every word in the Bock Saga. It's an ancient mythology that I appreciate. Chill. You're not making any points.
These are the exact questions that I asked on the previous roundtable that didn't elicit such a reaction from anybody.
No, you told me that I'm sidestepping. That's what elicited the reaction. Everyone knows it. The face right here.
I asked you what prevented the lower caste from reproducing. You started talking about people could avoid getting pregnant by astrology, but
There's plenty of ways they could have avoided. Yeah, you got roasted. It's right here for everyone to see. You can run it back. You can look at it one way if you want.
Just because people knew how to avoid it, like there's accidental teenage pregnancies now, people know how to avoid it.
Sure, they had accidents and they addressed the accidents in the story. You want to talk about them? Is that still sidestepping?
Did they was it like Roman style and they throwed it off a cliff or what?
Listen, I just answered your question.
I
don't want to start another line of questioning where you just, rattle it on and say, "Oh, I didn't do that." Nate or Andreas, feel free to pitch in here and
I'm kind of curious
give us some direction to the show. As far as I'm concerned,
there's a sick part of me that's like my boss.
This guy's a smoking brisket over here.
My boss used to be Bruce DeBrow, who made the Jerry Springer show. So there's a sick part of me that's like, oh, this is good radio. I gotta just let it happen. But part of me also wants to ask like legit questions. For instance, we're talking like I can see both sides of this thing, especially because I don't think Thomas is nearly as skeptical as he's presenting right now. He's like the guy who's the most endorsed the idea to me that I know. But regardless, the bells and the idea of technology that was ceremonial is very important because the idea that you could use sound healing for destruction if it turned evil is, I mean, this is, again, there's just too many examples where the Bock Saga works really well. I'll grab mine too, Thomas. Don't you worry. There'll be some solidarity, girlfriend. But here I'm saying about the weapons and the ceremonial uses. Is that sound weapons or what do you think, Longo? What do you mean by the ceremonial? What do they have?
I mean, what does
Ior
Bock say?
Yeah,
when he sees the weapons on the cave paintings, he says they were ceremonial. He says that the certain people with the certain roles carried certain weapons to show everyone what role they had.
Right, and again, we're not saying like this is the way things are. We're just saying like according to what we understand have read from the Bock Saga, but in the Bock Saga and from Ior Bock's experiences or talking, he's talking about the history of the world. That they're using these things ceremoniously. Are we talking about swords, or are we talking about like Tartarian bells, or like where are we? What do you?
No, just swords. Yeah, you can't infuse too much Tartaria with the Bock Saga. That's just
okay. Yeah,
too many cooks in the kitchen.
So you think there were? So it's swords and or like actual weapons, but they're not being used for violence in the like same way that they're. Off of wartime, we have, you put your dad's rifle on the wall.
The way it's been explained to me is when copulation reproduction is done in complete harmony. There's no underlying urge to swing a sword or to hurt people. Now, that being said, I've hurt a lot of people. This isn't like I'm saying we can just snap our fingers and make this happen today, or the people alive today would work in this system, Thomas. I think you're, fundamentally just approaching this from a million different wrong places. We're not trying to put the people alive today into the times back then. But that being said, when they actually did this ceremonial reproduction, fertility rituals, you fought the greatest war there's ever been. You fought the greatest war there's ever been, the bloodiest battle there's ever been. It was also the most intense race there's ever been. You made it to the egg, you conquered the others. You survived. This is the afterlife. This is the afterlife. And the evolution that science tries to muddy the waters with is the evolution of the eel, the sperm, making its way to the egg, racing, fighting, warring, being received into the egg, and then progressing through the stages of animal life on the planet. From pond scum to tadpole to toad, and so on, turtle, and so on, to terrestrial. And this is represented in the womb. The embryo takes the form of different animals, progressing like the stages of evolution in the womb. And according to this system, that is where evolution comes from. The misguided, corrupted conception of evolution put in a time frame preceding humanity, whereas it's actually the story of man in the womb. And in fact, the Bock Saga uses modern science a little bit like a system of mythology, saying, well, it's not the development of the embryo, or they don't have it as the embryo developing. They have it as pond scum going to iguana, or eel to iguana to monkey, and then we come out. The Bock Saga kind of rectifies that, because they explain how it's the eel. The eel is the original sperm. And the eel, Ior doesn't really talk about this, but the eel has a special connection to the Gulf Stream as well, which Ior does talk about. And the Bock Saga does deal with the Gulf Stream a lot. So the American eel is an interesting story out of Florida, but blah, blah, blah. You see the shifting of different creatures in the embryo. That's evolution. That's all the wars that have ever been fought on the world. In truth, that's the bloodiest battle. And when you win that battle and everything's, you're brought to term naturally and harmoniously, you've already conquered, warred, raised through the levels of animal life, and have ascended to godlike, a primate. And then, I forget. What were we talking about? What was I aiming for there?
Alchemy, the representation of the eel as the sperm, and maybe like the stubbornness of the goat, and like the wisdom of the ape. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. You want to talk about weapons? Do you want to finish? Do we want to clear up the point about the weapons?
I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, the idea of what a weapon even is, right? Because like the Bible says, tools are pounded into plowshares and pounded back into swords, and it seems like the same story.
So, okay, here. This is my thread here, is by the time you make it alive, by the time you make it to birth, you're already in Valhalla. You're already in the warrior's paradise. You're already in the athlete's, golden cup, golden age. You've ascended, you've won. That is terrestrial life. And that's why originally it was paradise-like. Now we can talk about the mishaps and what brought the winter, what brought the Ragnaroks and things like that. I thought we were just going to be talking Bock Saga history. Okay. I wasn't prepared for any type of debate here. I didn't think, one of us would be so skeptical that it would take the form of a debate. I
Me
thought
either.
we'd be beach balling.
Yeah,
I thought I'd be learning something. I didn't think I'd be,
I feel
teaching.
like you've put that cross on your own back, my friend.
whatever.
Well, all right, let's relax, kids. Unless you really want to fight, and then let's make it a television show. But I think we should probably.
Hey.
I like
really
Hey.
Longo's.
I know.
I like Longo's first idea though.
Thomas,
spitballing
make it.
about boxing.
Thomas, make it to 50K or wherever I'm at, 47K or whatever, and then
Pretty
we'll do a
good.
Then we'll do a
Whatever.
creator. Then we'll do a creator clash.
I want Greek wrestling.
Okay.
I'm just like verbal debates. I want to see people
If you
throw
want.
down.
But
But wait.
nonetheless,
I
this
think
is really not a fair intellectual fight, is it?
It's
We
not.
might have to make it a little even.
One of
playing
us
field.
keeps
Who knows?
forgetting what we're talking about mid-sentence and like piping off and getting
This
really
is like
upset.
Joan Rivers
One
and
of us
Whoopi
is
Goldberg.
kinda having a good time and
I
asking
can't
questions.
believe this is happening, Nate. I love you. I love you, Nate. The weirdest thing is like I went into this thinking everybody was like super pro talk. I didn't know. Yeah, I kind of feel confused about. I think there's a
I was cool with
confused if there's
Thomas.
an argument. I feel like
I was
there's a
cool with
confusion.
Thomas.
I'm really just surprised. I think this is fake because I know that this is not this conversation I expected. But
I'm
that's
ready to
okay.
keep
This was
going.
all
Mate,
scripted. Everyone, by the way, like we actually rehearsed this beforehand, which is why it seems so fucking convincing.
Yeah, Juan
No.
was like, "Do it like this." All right. I don't know. What about the idea of the
Super chat if you fell for it. If you fell for it, super chat us right now. You fucking idiots.
You got
Yeah, no, that was actually all 100% real, and I stand by everything I said.
So do you want to talk about the idea of weapons more, or do you want? Where do you want to go, Longo?
Sure.
'Cause we can
Yeah.
spitball over this.
By the time people were born, there's no impulse to fight in war, and when you're not, I'm not one of these leftist pacifists.
Right.
But ultimately, when there's no resources to fight over, and you're literally preoccupied with eating mangoes and having sex with the most beautiful women you've ever seen in your life,
Anthropologically, we see it everywhere. Yeah.
they revered this lifestyle. They missed it so dearly that it's sunk into the subconscious, unconscious of every person right up to this day. Some of people's greatest fantasies were daily occurrences back then, and that works both ways. There's things that would disgust people today that were daily occurrences back then too. But basically, the weapons were ceremonial. Have you ever held a weapon ceremonially? It's cool. You don't necessarily want to kill someone with it. And they understood the Bock Saga doesn't go into this, so I'm taking a little liberty here. But the difference between man and woman is that man is endowed with a weapon, with a club. The member, the penis would clearly inspire weaponry. Even if man had never seen weaponry, there's something to swing, something to hold on to, a handle, hey, if I want to swing this, what's handle like? Well, it's intuitive, right? Moving forward, you have women who are wounded. Women are wounded, meaning they have a wound, a wound, a gash that bleeds. So in ancient times, they actually thought and would depict women as being stabbed, and it would be pulled out, and this is a fresh wound that's renewed every month. And the Bock Saga, like I'm saying, I'm filling in some gaps here, but the weaponry I can perfectly think of a world where weaponry was not the norm and warring was not the norm. They felt as though they had already conquered. They understood they had been chosen. They understood. And by the way, they battled. It says that they, battled like camp counselor or summer camp style with the bags of, wheat tied onto the stick. They still warred. They still, had their sport. They still had ways of getting out that testosterone or getting out. So, satisfactory. Is there anything I'm sidestepping here? Do I need to wash my feet the whole time we're conducting this?
To be fair, Longo, I've seen you dance, and when you sidestep, it's a mean trick. So I just want to point that out. But I don't know. I think that we could also talk a bit about the idea of what makes the human different. because there's this idea that humans have changed a lot. And so is it so, I mean, maybe Thomas, you're being presentist. You're like, wow, I can't imagine how I would have lived in that time.
I just don't believe it. I think it's a silly fantasy world where people don't fight. That's silly. Like there's no bar fights, no people
So
getting
we're
into
getting at the root of the problem here. Is it's just too silly for you, and we shouldn't really be entertaining this. We could realistically boot this guy and have a way better conversation.
So let's what I think is interesting is that this was all one family, and so in that one family there wouldn't be the crazy amounts of wars, there wouldn't be the crazy amounts of battles, because I think about the royal family, like how the royal family was even like almost like 150 years ago, right? The royal family, like the wars between the monarchs were almost, they were like staged, right? They were almost just like they would argue and they would just kind of go to war. The first time that was interrupted was Napoleon, right? That was the emperor that was not of the royal bloodline that actually made war serious, that made war real. So I think that is actually kind of a modern example of what war would be like if it was all in one family, because they would just kind of like, it was almost more of a sport. Like they would be like, here's my army. They'd have a flat battle. They would say,
Thomas, have you ever seen how they fight in Africa or in like Papua New Guinea? The way it works is that every person who dies, the king has to pay the other side for every soldier that's died. Like there's so many weird honor traditions that don't make sense to Europeans because we've lost honor in life, and we like. Long ago talking about when we look at violence on TV.
Yes.
But it's when people like think about it, like, wow, like the 30,000 people died today in Iraq, like an African tribal person's like, that's a lot of chickens, you know, because they're thinking there's a cost to life, right?
There's so many elements that we're not even addressing. You know, Thomas, you're not critiquing it. Saying something silly is not a critique. It's really just
saying something seems absurd to you. I don't hear it. Yeah, it's not. I don't hear it as a critique though, Longo. I hear it as him saying, "I statement. I don't feel like I understand this." So to me, it's Greek to me. That's
I have a knee-jerk reaction to any sort of utopian blank, and I just think that humans are incapable of utopian societies, especially on the scale and timeline that Bock Saga purports to.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about utopia.
I'm not gonna lift a finger. Any more of a finger to convince you that it's not silly. I'd rather just talk about the Bock Saga.
Yeah, let's talk about
as far as I'm concerned, you're uninvited from the conversation. I mean,
that's fine. I'm not going anywhere.
If it's silly.
Let's talk about utopia. Let's talk about this idea. Like, what is it we're talking about?
I think we're proving utopia can't exist by this exact interaction.
No,
Because I feel like I would be in Bock Saga times and you would be in Bock Saga times, and I'd be like,
I'm not so many reasons. No, you're just really attacking it at face value. You could talk about how they didn't circumcise whatsoever back then. They never thought about sacrificing an animal.
But what does it have to do with not punching somebody?
Negative. Because if you are callous and cold-hearted, because the tip of your penis is calloused, you will respond to aggression more easily. Maybe that's why I have such a short fuse with fucking fat Freemasons, is because I'm circumcised. Are we all circumcised here? It gives you a short fuse.
In my attitude that I'm not, and I agree with you, Longo. I think that's a serious. I think the post-traumatic stress, ingrained memories of violence. And even when people hurt animals, people always say like someone who hurts an animal is likely to become a serial killer. People that are shown and seen suffering of animals and they're like, this is okay. It's not the same as you. That's a slippery slope. And of course, that would lead to if you have and we look at society, we've talked about this from other angles. People didn't used to kill and butcher and slaughter. And all of a sudden in 2 generations, killing, butchering and slaughtering becomes the only way for them to live. And that changes their entire ethos.
Yeah, of course, a presumably meat-eating Freemason cannot even fathom a peaceful world. I mean, does that shock me? No, that's probably the world you're most fearful of. It's the world you're most fearful of is one where the Masonic lies and control tactics and taboo guilt tripping have no place in a world like Bock's describing. So, of course, a Freemason would recoil in fear at the thought of such a free and perfect place. And by the way, this is a mythology. You're still acting as though we're full proponents of the theory, as if it gives you better grounds to just, baselessly attack it. You're taking a full oppositional stance when we ourselves are not even full proponents of the theory. So if it's silly, you're silly.
Well, everyone knows that I am the fear-mongery guy that hates to be called silly. So you've hit me in two different really sore spots.
I think also Harry Mary, right? So earlier when we first started this conversation, one of the things I wanted to talk about, we were talking about like the biblical connections and how the story of the goat is Christ, and Harry Mary, like the idea of the ape, the wild men stuff in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And so the idea that Christ is the goat, and then there's the ape aspect, and that this is creating some sort of a lineage or whatever. Like these seem like similar metaphors, and it's weird because someone might say, "Oh, the Bock Saga seems silly," or they might say the Bible seems silly. But the point is that they're really similar. I mean, at the very least, at the most esoteric level. And like you just said, Longo, it's a mythology. It's not, it's not supposed to be a science journal necessarily. It's a mythology. Yeah, man.
Anything productive to say? Are you going to teach us anything about the saga, Thomas? Or are you just representing Neil deGrasse Tyson and the like here?
I'd like to maybe hyper focus on one particular aspect of like the no weaponry. So my understanding is that, and I'll stop.
What does no weaponry mean? We've already established they had weapons. We've already established they had a different use. We haven't gone into the military ranks, which we can, but go on.
We've gone on, and we can't go backwards now. We're done.
No, I'm just glossing over what we have.
So a very specific and practical example is the shield, and again, a lot of my information comes specifically from Carl Borgen's book and lots of videos that I've seen on the German Bock Saga channel. But my understanding is that the shield, it has a conveniently deceptive design, that it looks like it's got a leather strap that you might put your arm through, and that it's got this concave shape that would conveniently block like projectiles coming at you or someone trying to stab you. But all of that is just a coincidence, and really the strap on the back of a shield is to hold somebody's penis, and the concavity is to collect their semen so that the general can drink the semen, and that the coincidence that the shield that you would use in actual physical warfare just happens to be the same thing that you use to drink a bunch of semen.
What's so cool about this conversation is it's like so discordian. I don't know what's right or wrong. It's amazing.
Did I present any of that in like a farcical way, or
I think you're probably fixating on one specific design of a shield. The general gist here is that a shield is a bowl. A shield is a saucer. Are you fixating on one specific shield design that you're trying to force onto the theory? The general agreed conclusion is that a shield is like a bowl or a saucer.
The underlying premise being that warfare objects really didn't exist for physical conflict, that they were made for procreation,
or that they have an inherent double use and double symbolism, which you're just sidestepping or ignoring.
Isis has a staff in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is both a weapon and a tool. It's used for genetic modification, right?
Let's at least present some of the phonetic, evidences that military as a whole originated in part, at least, for lovemaking and the production of children. Have you ever heard this, Thomas? Did you catch this part of the book?
No, you're going to have to fill me in.
Private and such? Okay. So, according to the Bock Saga, which Thomas is attempting to, give a summary of here, there's a utopian type of condition. There's little war, if not no conflict, very little bloodshed. They avoided it at all costs. There were instances of bloodshed, when people lived to a certain age. They would be clubbed over the head after jumping off a steep ledge, right? Now, is that something that I want to implement in society? No, but Thomas might act as though, It's something we all want implemented just because we entertain the Bock Saga and talk about it. But there were instances of bloodshed. There were violence. There were instances of violence. They weren't necessarily war or malevolent. So we've literally laced all of these points here to an adequate explanation of, you raised the question. Well, we've explained it. You've got why the soup bowl, why the shield is like a bowl.
To me enough to accept it, but that's fine. Well, this is not a debate for you to convince me. I'm just presenting the counterpoints.
Let's go to the ranks of the military. According to the Bock Saga, the military was originally geared towards production of children. All the orderliness, all the discipline, all the medals and pageantry and opulence and rank and file and all this was exclusively geared towards the production of beautiful, smart, healthy children. Now, under that system, you had a role and you knew it. In fact, you might even be named. Okay? You might even be named after your role. So you're bringing identity into the question. If you're named after your role, you might not even ever think, you can never even fathom deviating from your role, especially if decades and decades. So just to your point about people deviating or, having outside inklings, it happened and they address it. But in this well-oiled machine where, yes, everyone's roughly one family, paradise conditions, you've got people who are into what they're doing. They believe in it. They see the good in it. They feel the benefits. They see how everyone's healthy and good. They don't tolerate defects. They don't tolerate that. But to the ranks, this is how it all kind of got organized. And we see this today. What you've got is words like private. We're going to see this in the ranks. We're going to see this in the weaponry. We're going to see this in the tactics. And I'm going to fill in a lot of blanks here. The Bock Saga gives us maybe a handful, like 10 or so examples of weapons or ranks named after, sexual innuendo, kind of. Private, reporting for duty. Your privates, the privates in the military. Infantry, the creation of infants, of children, preoccupied with beauty and birth and love. There's a whole universe, whole different universe. Private, infantry, foot soldier. This one's not in the book. Okay, foot soldier. When you're born, the soles of your feet are dyed and taken onto a birth certificate. Your feet are dyed. The soles of your feet are dyed. So the foot sole dyer is the man dyeing the soles of the feet upon birth. It's a low, subordinate role. This is not a lovemaker. This is not, these are the low ranks. Private, infantry, foot sole dyer. Let's look at corporal. Corporal. Well, if you're a corporal, you might be a lance corporal. Just for those who don't know, corporal means flesh or of the flesh. Corporal desires, corporal punishment. Of the body, of the flesh, of the corpse, right? Corporal, lance corporal. Lance is a spear. This is a fancy way of saying meat spear. Lance corporal. Then you have other ranks such as lieutenant. Lieutenant. This person is tending to the loo or is a tenant in the loo, in the bathroom. This is not living room activities. This is not auditorium activities. This is behind closed doors and maybe even a laboratory. A lieutenant. Staff sergeant. Sergeant is a little harder to dissect. It's spelt a little strange in English, but you have sir, you have gent, you have genealogy, sergeant. I've heard a lot of people break that down differently, but you can have it mean the same thing. Captain would be a man who's responsible for 10 underlings, cap 10, that even, holds the same meaning. Seamen, seamen in the Navy. Ranks, you have admiral. Once we're hitting the high ranks here, you're going to see more power, more decision making. Admiral is a judge of beauty, is he not? An admiral, an admirer. Now, the vice admiral, what part of the body do you think he's inspecting? Might get put in a vice grip. The rear admiral, what part of the body do we think he's inspecting? The admirals. You can't deny this stuff, guys. When it's one after another, after another, after another, you can't just call coincidence. You can't just call it wishful thinking. When we go on to the other ranks, rear admiral, vice admiral, colonel, not to be disgusting, but colon. Why do you say colonel when it's colonal? Colonal, right? This still has to do with reproduction and fertility. Those are just the ranks. And if I'm not mistaken, the book only talks about the ranks. And I'm probably missing a ton. Let's go to the weaponry. Even firearms take on these meanings because the words for firearms were applied to other things well before firearms were invented. Pistol. And I'm going to switch between edged weaponry and ballistic weaponry here. Forgive me. Pistol. Rapier. Okay. I've got a list here. Let me get on the list, actually. No, maybe not. My old computer. Ambush. Assault. Really, you pick out any word, any military term, and I can give you the meaning. These aren't just, perverted, like, random folk etymology associations, even though that's what Bock, it really is that. That is the essence of words in themselves. But this isn't just one man's take on these words. They truly all, across the board, have this double meaning in reproduction.
Dr. Longo, I'm curious about this because I've thought about the English language for a long time. It's a fucking weird one, right? It's kind of like a mash of all these other languages. And it is funny that this has become kind of the world's language. It kind of seems like it was done on purpose, right? And it does seem to me that, like, we are so ignorant of the words we're saying all the time. Like, when we say things, like, it seems to me like English is almost like a magical language, almost to entrap us. I almost, like, with like word magic and things like that, it can be
I don't know,
it can be a form of entrapment, but it can also be a form of, like, freedom too, if you know what the words that you're saying mean.
Yeah, this is another thing that the Bock Saga really does a good job addressing. Is English is a valid language. It's a valid system for understanding ancient words. It is angular language. It's the modern day Phoenician. This is another thing the Bock Saga, why does the Bock Saga make sense to me? It wasn't the perverted stuff, which I had no plan on fixating on tonight. It's the language. It's the etymology. The Bock Saga is the wellspring of etymology, of toponymy, of folk etymology. The Bock Saga is the great fountain that feeds all these, schools of thought. Etymology goes back to the Bock Saga. Why? Because almost every phonetic language goes back to Phoenician. Our phonetic alphabet goes back to Phoenician. Nobody, not even the academics, can give you a good explanation as to where the Phoenicians come from. The Bock Saga, however, puts forth that the Etruscans were an early colonization attempt by the Finnish, as was the Sumerians. The Etruscans are known to be one of the earliest great building civilized peoples to move into the Mediterranean and establish a great empire. Well, they showed up with what looks like runes. It's older than Hebrew, depending on who you ask. Etruscan is runes. Today, they want us to believe that the runes come from the south, that the runes came from the Middle East. They came from ancient Hebrew, they came from Phoenician, then Hebrew, then Greek, then Latin, then, the Romance languages and English. That's not true. Okay? What you actually have... Oh, also, the Bock Saga explains why, of all the languages on the planet, they pretty much fall into two schools, or two groups. Languages that count to 10 and then repeat, or languages that count to 12 and then repeat. Languages that count to 12 or repeat, or count to 10 and repeat. And this fundamental change or difference between languages is unaddressed, little, if ever addressed by anthropologists, linguists, why these two schools exist across different language groups. Andreas, we're just talking here about the languages with 10 and 12, and how the Bock Saga gives, in my opinion, the greatest explanation of why that is. And the Bock Saga gives the greatest explanation as to where Phoenician comes from, where the alphabet comes from. It's runes coming south, not Greek or Hebrew or Latin going north. It's runes coming down from the north.
Which actually, like, 10 and 12 proves this, because you can do first off, the Scandinavian connection with Sanskrit, and then you see the Indo-Aryan connection going south, and the stories like every revision of the Greek Iliad, which show that they come from Scandinavian traditions, which originally come from Indo-Arya, which is weird because you'd think they would have come directly from India, but they come from the north. So it also says it's coming from North India and North Scandinavia. And the 12 thing is key, because we use 10 now, and it's kind of destroyed our intuitive ability to think in numbers. But if you use 12, everything is divisible every direction.
Yes, and to your point, Nate, about English being a trapping language, and I know you gave it, the alternative of it, having a good application. I would really stress that good application, and the fact that the Bock Saga tells us that English, this is a claim the Bock Saga makes, is that English is one of the top 3 oldest, I don't know if they say oldest, but original, root, true, valid languages on the planet. Phonetic languages with a phonetic alphabet. Swedish-Finnish, or Finnish-Swedish being first, which is what they call the root language, which is not plotted on your Indo-European, web
right
diagrams.
It's not every Sanskrit likes to say everything comes from Sanskrit, but Finnish is clearly its own thing.
Yes.
It's probably older, it looks like.
Yes.
And more complicated by a long shot.
So the language supports this, and when you look to India, they literally have legends of polar people coming from Hyperborea. There's a book written called Arctic Home in the Vedas, or Arctic Home of the Vedas, which approaches this completely outside of the Bock Saga. There's total, schools of research that come to the same conclusions with big missing gaps that the Bock Saga fills. So it's not that I'm won over by the gross sex stuff, but it is also the greatest explanation I've ever come in contact with of fertility cults, of fertility rituals, why everyone was obsessed with it, why so many resources were going towards, mass copulation rituals, royal, exhibitions of having sex and things like that. Yeah. Why did that have a place in society?
The Freemasons would be so much more boring without all the sex rituals. Let's be honest. Come on. You owe the Bock Saga.
I didn't get high enough to have the fun stuff, though.
Yet. There's still time.
Not yet, Thomas. There's stuff to look forward to. You can be a piss piggy.
I'll put in a good word for you.
I appreciate that.
The things that I kind of want to get into were the split, right, into the Bock Saga, right? They talk about the Swede and the Den, right? The Danu and like
Yes,
the
wonderful.
separation, the brothers,
Yes.
and the differences between what people would call like satanic and Luciferian, and the inversion that we are told. I don't know if you want to get into that or because that to me is fascinating.
Yeah, the Dan line and the Sven line is another explanation that I've never heard so well articulated, just put forth in one single concept. I'm Irish, I have Irish ancestry on one side. On the other side, it's German with a little English, a little Austrian, very, just German, you could say.
Prussian.
That word's changed a little, but we'll just call it German. Culturally, anyone living in America, especially, you don't have to go to Ireland or Germany to see this contrast. There is such a contrast between the Irish and their like and their kin, the Irish, the Scottish, and the other inhabitants of the British Isles, who are the Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, admittedly Germanic, Danish, descended. What we're seeing here is the best kind of visualization, encapsulation of the Dan versus Sven. Why are the British and the Irish, why are the Irish so persecuted by who essentially are their next door neighbors and should, in theory, be their closest genetic relatives, even though that might not be the case? No one's really ever explained it. Why not band together? What's this fundamental difference? Well, if there's a fundamental difference going on in your pants, that's irreconcilable. And there's no amount of assimilation that'll change your physiognomy, right? Now, that's kind of what the Bock Saga puts forth, is that all the different races were shaped differently. And originally, we can, we're jumping timelines here, but there's 10 kingdoms in the world, according to the Bock Saga. Well, then there was 2 extra ones produced by, you could say folly or, free will being introduced to the introduced to the world stage. Man, like I was saying, was very, in a paradise system, there's not much free will. I'm sure they could play beautiful music, but like I'm saying, you're preoccupied with eating the fruit, copulating. There's literally nothing else to do. You're so busy eating fruit and having sex and enjoying paradise. This, according to this story, right, that there wasn't really free will or folly or mistake or neglect, and society wasn't hinging on people's, paying the bills and things like that. So, I don't know. Reel me in here. Forgot what I was talking about.
Well, just the idea of utopia. I mean, so in a non-scarcity based environment where you have access to everything you need all the time, and you're not constantly worried about environmental disaster, because you're kind of in a microbiome, this is that emerges out, because the other thing we never even got to really is the Ice Age. Right. Yeah. And like how this is like, I think this is kind of relevant to why this is the way it is. All right.
I remember the Dan and Sven line. That's why we're, addressing the differences between people. The Dan and Sven line is the fundamental difference between what would seem like one race of people. Northern Europeans, according to the Bock Saga, are 3 very distinct races of people. Even though we all look white, where my brothers at out there, my Aboriginal American Moorish brothers represent. I know we all look the same. We're all a bunch of honkies, with bird-like features, just, talking. But believe it or not, the Dan line, well, according to the Finnish story, you've got this Bock Saga. The original one singular white race was the progenitor of the Finns and the Russians. The Swedes, the Finns, and the Russians. Some of the Swedes. That's the pirouette, or the Bock, or, the, what do they call them? The Osser, the higher upper class is going to be that specific race, that family, that group of people, that bloodline. It was through a mistake or a deviation or extra pressure was put on them, environmental circumstances that put a little extra pressure on them. They had to kind of reproduce under pressure, and they weren't having the exact amount of kids at the exact time like they had planned and had done in accordance with their tradition for, as they say, 1,000,000 years, which, I don't know if I agree with that, but that's according to the story. 1,000,000 years, 50 million years, they followed these traditions, but something did something did crumble, something did collapse, something was corrupted. There was a mistake made, a folly, a sexual mistake, a violent mistake. It's not exactly laid out, but man fell, very similar to how he did in the Bible, and the environment changed as a response. Now they say that this is the axis of the earth tilting, which brought about a change in the climate, which brought about the ice age, floods in some areas, freezing in others, blah blah blah. Under these new circumstances, whereas previously there was a tropical paradise, now with the ice ages, the extra pressure on living, the consumption of blood is something that disturbed things too. These were vegetarians in a paradise. By starting to eat meat, yes, you start to bring in those urges that you're kind of quarreling with earlier, Thomas. The bloodlust, the extra sexual, the bloodlust and just regular lust. It wasn't as much of an issue until our diet got more violent.
They talk about sattvic versus rajestic and atomic, right? So if you're sattvic, you're in peace, and the Taoists, the Chinese, like the Taiwanese, the Indians, they all have this, Russians, sort of like basically telepathy with animals and plants, and everything is kind of able to communicate up until they become rajestic. And rajestic is where they become more aggressive because they're eating meat and killing and all these things, and they're digesting those hormones, and all of a sudden you lose telepathy, you lose some of those special kind of divine thing. This is exactly what they say in Hinduism, and a number of other, like in South America, they have similar stories about people going from vegetarian to killing and eating meat.
Yeah.
That is really, really fascinating. I just want to touch on something real fast, and maybe you have some insight into this. I've talked to some interesting folks that were vegans that they came on the show and talked about when an animal is murdered, and a little bit of the. Anyways, like ingesting that blood, you almost kind of get like an adrenochromic kind of effect from it.
Yeah, like that fox, like the fox hunt. Yeah.
Why the hell not? It's only logical.
And they do it on purpose. That's why the fox hunt is to get the frazzle drip. They know that,
And something that you were touching on, though, Andreas, was you were saying the South American. So they were also saying that to become a shaman, you have to stop ingesting any sort of animal proteins, any type.
Well, like even let's imagine you're like some white, like rich person who wants to go do like an ayahuasca retreat, and you go down there and you've been eating like hamburgers and things like that. Like you're gonna go through the gnarliest, most painful like purging process. So it's just practical sense.
All of that.
It's practical sense not to have lycopene in your gut that it's going to be like rejected, And so what you end up doing is you find a diet which is essentially plants. And if you're in Peru, and you'll notice you walk around in any direction, you'll see fruits that are, because they've been grown in the Amazon and there's minerals in the water that's turned up. Avocados that are bigger than basketballs. I've literally had avocados that are larger than a watermelon, and carrots that are the size of your average watermelon here, just crazy, giant, healthy food that's all natural. And it's hard to imagine needing anything else because all that stuff has direct nutrients from source, right? So they didn't need that. They didn't need to kill other things, and it wasn't necessary. When people act like heat, meat, or mushroom is this sort of brain changing agent, but everyone's arguing it. No one's convinced that it's one or the other, right? That meat necessarily evolve the human brain. But I think it's true of all things. I think there is an effect. I think the meat might have made you more majestic, taken away telepathy, like all these things that the ancients said. Probably some truth to it. And the fact
and Bock inserts semen as like a fourth option out of those, no?
Well, and again, to say that Bock does that instead of like the Tantra or like the Lakota, I mean, there's a lot of traditions that talk about this, including
isn't
the
the
Bible.
premise of Bock that Bock is the original? It's the root. So if all these other cultures and religions have it, it's really because Bock had it.
I mean, the point is there be dragons. If someone's talking about something and someone else is talking about something and they have no relationship to each other, it says that there's probably something there, right? And so the idea that exhausting yourself...
Lemuria. This is the Lemuria premise, right?
Yeah, but also
like two completely separate areas have the same sort of identical root, but you don't have a trace of that root.
But also just like why dudes on the internet that become addicted to pornography eventually find out that they're exhausted all the time because it's just practical that they're like exhausting themselves. And so they find out like retention is just not jerking. I mean, they have no nut November, right? Like it becomes practical sense because they experience it. And if they don't, then, you know, you'll be naive to it. And it's easier.
Shout out to the double soul shaman. I wish he was here because he would definitely touch in on that. For sure, retention.
Yeah, I think,
he would.
I think I would have had more.
It's weird. It's weird to pretend.
I think I would have had more of a. I think I would have had more of a field day with double.
Oh, you calm down, you calm down.
Than Freemason
you
over
simmer,
here.
buddy. You simmer.
But no, I mean it's not fair.
Double soul shaman and this guy would have gotten along just great.
It's not fair to blame one
so.
person for, you know, nature, I think is the point. And the fact that when people are constantly like, again, we see it in our society, these kids are exhausted all the time because they're just like watching porn and they're like spilling their seed on the ground. Again, biblical stuff. So it's not fair to say it's Bock. It's more like everybody. But yeah, it's true. He's saying it's the original objective. I think it's more the point of that to figure out why is it more relevant, and the answer is he's saying that this is why this is happening. This is what happens when, you know, these are things that are not explained always, right?
And all the more reason why this is all mythological and allegorical and more just telling you like it's a better way to live. Hold on to your seed. Don't just waste it on things. Don't come on the ground. Come in our pussy.
You know, that's
again
exactly.
literal.
I think everyone can get behind the idea that those precious fluids are precious to humanity as a whole, and that we've only gotten this far because they were treated preciously. And we live in a society where those fluids are considered disposable. I think that's terrible. The Bock Saga challenges that. The Bock Saga tries to correct that. And that should be commended. If you come to different conclusions, whatever, but ultimately it's a white magic manual. It is a manual on white magic, white tantra. Like I said, there's no victimization, there's no kidnapping, there's no, you know, you can say it's a little gross here and there, but ultimately you're just looking at a clean, polished mirror. And anything that disgusts you is, you know, some inhibition that you're dealing with.
Like fat Freemasons? Like fat
Freemasons? I think most of the truth community has aversions to fat Freemasons, with all due respect.
Isn't that just a mirror that you're holding up in front of yourself, though, by that logic? Are you just afraid of the fat Freemason inside of you?
No, I'm a thin, healthy, running vegetarian because I detest fat Freemasons and the idea of anyone becoming a fat Freemason. Don't take it personally, Thomas. Not everything's about you.
It's a fair point. I've learned that tonight for the first time.
I can get Thomas on a quinoa diet and run him if you really want, but I think he's kind of pretty this way. So it is what it is.
I've got one more annoying question if I'm allowed to ask. It's open to the room. It doesn't even necessarily have to entertain anyone that doesn't want to entertain it back. But do we think it is metaphorical or literal, the story about Freed consuming himself and learning the language from that, or was it more of a slow, organic process as we're conventionally told languages evolve? Do you think it was like a spontaneous, drank semen, knew the alphabet? Is that literal, or is there more to that could be stretched out? Open question to the room. It's
a story. It's a mythology. Could it be true? I've actually, there's a way you can approach it that sets it up for more validity. Do we know that goats could create a human species? Because if we're talking literal, you have to address that before anything. The premise of the Bock Saga, as you said earlier, that man comes from goat and ape together. Now, that's not something that I believe. That's not something that I hold true. I am a Christian after all. Okay. I am, other things that aren't the Bock Saga. But what you have is an instance of mythology. It is deep, transcendental, material. This is something you sit with and ponder on. Do you read the first sentence in the Bible and say, "Oh, why haven't I gotten it the first time around?" No.
I mean, to be fair, I did.
Okay. Well, you don't just read the most sacred, initial, crucial premise of a work of art or a work of, literature or religious truth and say, "Hey, this has to be literal or else it's garbage." That's the number one. That's the sign of a incompetent occult, armchair occultist, as Juan would say. That's someone who, what's the?
I'll embrace that. What I struggle with is figuring out,
what's the measurement? What's the measurement of?
At what point a text transitions from metaphorical to literal? Because usually it's some things are.
It's called philosophy. It's called mythology. Take a dive. Don't just address it as some, Freemason skeptic. You can take a dive. What's the measurement of a smart man? What's the measurement of a genius? What's the measurement of a tolerant man? Being able to entertain an idea, being able to see it through and hold true to the idea and not adopting it 100%, to get a full conception of it. You're just throwing slop at a wall and calling yourself a critic or an honest researcher, but you're really just a silly.
I publish comic books, just to be clear.
thrower.
I've never considered myself to be a debater or a researcher. I literally publish comic books. That's what I do.
No, yeah.
So that's
Sounds
what you're
good.
arguing against. And maybe that would have helped to start with. You're arguing against a guy that makes comic books.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Anything else on the Bock Saga we gotta clear up?
We got 2 hours deep. We should Longo talk to me in a minute. We'll do something soon. That's for sure. And then, but yeah, is there anything else you guys wanted to cover?
I mean, the little stuff that I was going to ask about was like the usurpation of it, like the separation between the satanic and the Luciferian. But I mean, we can touch on any of that if you want to, or
Sure, I've got plenty of time. I got time.
I'd like to comment on that too, actually. Again, because how this started was, I just did this conversation and we're deep diving in the Bible and talking, the Knights Templar and how everyone looked at them as Satanists because they were talking about Christ and the Baphomet and the goat. And if you look at this story of the breast goddess Ashtoreth and the stories of the goat connected to the, this idea of like the primordial man and the ape, I mean, basically a lot of the things that we're told are satanic might be actually just about Jesus, right? Because like Jesus and the Lucifer are supposed to be really similar to an extent.
So the Bock Saga raises the greatest kind of. It's like I'm a Jupiterian. I believe in Jesus. I'm all into Jesus. The Bock Saga addresses the kind of the advent of Jupiterianism, at least in man's recent modern memory. The Bock Saga takes an approach that Saturn, and I'm filling in the gaps here. This is my own take. This is not, canon of the Bock Saga. The Bock Saga really sympathizes with Saturn. Bock is a goat. The goat is Saturn. It's very satanic. It's the winter. We're not saying satanic is evil here. We're saying Saturnian. Although if you're a fundamentalist Christian, I don't know if there's anything more satanic than what we're describing here. The Bock Saga kind of holds dear to Saturn. And we see this in the discipline. We're, Thomas, to be fair, we're kind of living in a Jupiterian age, or, you could argue a Luciferian age. Those are not the same thing at all, not interchangeable, but we're living in a different age that is very geared towards free will. And it's hard to conceptualize that people back then would stick to such a regimen, such a strict, well-oiled system. But when you think of Capricorn and the astrological qualities of Capricorn and Saturn, they're all about discipline and, you know, to the T, dot every I, cross every T, show up on time. Yet it's like a corporation. But back then it was paradise times, but they had that corporation lockstep attitude that is kind of lost today, or at least manifests in you know, ill-applied ways today, like the office buildings where everyone's dressed the same and goes to lunch at the same time. You know, there's a lot of things we do today that are just ridiculous from the outside, seeing how disciplined and how consistent people are in such soul-sucking endeavors. It doesn't behoove, you know, it doesn't, I'm not dumbfounded or in disbelief that at some time, ancient time, people followed this good tradition to a T for a long time. That being said, it fell apart, like we were saying. But yeah, here. What were we talking about here?
Someone asked a question about Odin. Someone asked a question about Odin Ma. What's Odin Ma? You want to talk about that at all?
Odin Ma is what they call the original Garden of Eden, you could say. It's the North Pole. It is a ring around the North Pole. Why is the sun represented as a ring with a dot in the center, alchemically and astrologically? Well, it's not that the ring is the outline of the sun. It's the ring that the sun is making around the North Pole. And the dot in the center is the North Pole. So when you see an atom and you see your, you know, protons or whatever spinning around the nucleus, or I don't fucking know, the atom, the Jimmy Neutron, you know, spinning around, you're seeing the North Pole, the sun and the moon spinning around the North Pole, taking circles, and that is where you get the sun symbol. So Odin Ma, they make a big point out of stressing the oo in Odin Ma, and how this is the oo, and oo is a ring because you make a ring with your mouth. It's the roundest noise there is, and Odin Ma is the name for the original Garden of Eden, according to this story. You know, don't grill me on some of my other content here, but Odin Ma, according to this story, is the domain of Odin. Odin being the foremost god in this pantheon. Odin, they called it Odin. They don't use the word, they don't use the sound O either, ah or O. They say oo for O. So Odin Ma, Odin is Odin, which is also Eden. So that explains, or it gives an explanation of how we get Eden. So Odin Ma, I guess they would tell you, is part of Finland, if not all of Finland, whatever's encompassed by this ring, the closest ring outside of the North Pole. There was a series of ringlands, according to the Bock Saga, where all the communities lived in ringlands. So beyond all being descended from the same family, you're in a smaller subfamily, in a smaller sub-zone that's also, you know, a tight genetic group. So very homogenous. And I've heard it said, and I've said it, that you could go from Finland to Mogadishu in these Bock times and see the same group of people and be treated like family, because it was. So, yeah, one ethnic group, you could say, originally. And we were kind of going into how the Dan and Sven line split up. Odin Ma has a little bit to do with that. The ringlands were given to different groups of people. And we're jumping all over the place here. But when the Ice Age came, when pressure hit, Odin Ma was under threat, and they had to leave. And they had to hide in one part of Finland near Helsinki and kind of wait out the Ice Age. Now, when they had to leave because another threatening event was coming. Ragnarok, they call it. They had to go out to Northern Europe, and they had to spread out. And this is where you get your myths and tales and legends of Atlantis. how these northerners, these gods from the North Pole, why are they gods? Because they're the people of the goat. They're not claiming any divine authority necessarily. They're saying we're the people of the goat. And they named the places they first came to Gotland, Gothenburg. You know, this would go on to inspire the Goths, right? And by the way, how can we show that Norse people or Scandinavian people showed up in the Middle East and seeded much of civilization? And this is largely where our modern history picks up. You know, this is another thing that the Bock Saga explains. Why does history just start in Sumeria? Why do they at least frame it that way in school? Well, in the Bock Saga, it explains all bodies were buried. Sorry, all bodies were burned. All bodies were burned in Paradise times. Why? Because they didn't want the future to look like a graveyard. If every body ever gets put in the ground, then you're going to be, you know, up to your ears in bones in a couple thousand years.
Yeah,
So
literally, because eventually with flooding, like the bones pop out. Like if you ever lived in Louisiana during a flood season, it's horrible. The graveyards.
Yeah. So you've got the shit. What was I?
Well, you're talking about
Sorry,
burning the bodies and destroying the.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they burned the bodies, and that's why we don't see, you know, Homo sapien all across the world in ancient times, past 100,000, 300,000 years, whatever you want to, you know, say, with the evolution theory. They won't admit that humans have ever been here past 300,000 years old. And remember, that was only 100,000 years ago in the 90s when they were arguing.
And
now
first,
it's 300,000.
They're like, oh, and these humans, like, this is the first time that humans start burying them. Like, no, these are mass graves. What the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
This is not the same as a grave.
So, under the Bock Saga, these people buried their dead. Another thing they did was they didn't have any written language. They did have a written alphabet, but they didn't use language like we use today. They did not write books. They did not carve into stone unless they absolutely needed to. That was a tenet that they hold dear. They never carved stone or shaped stone with a tool unless they absolutely had to. They much preferred to cast stone, like a Freemason. Like the Freemasons have been hiding for thousands of years, you know, the true, hidden, free, life-preserving techniques that Freemasonry hides. The Finns claim, you know, claim that they originated it, you know, in these ice times, paradise times. And this is why in the Bible to this day, you'll see Exodus 20, somewhere around there, 20, 26, somewhere around there. Exodus, it says, God, the goat, greatest of all time, the goat, the most high. All of these ring true for the goat. The goat in astrology is the highest point of the zodiac. It is Capricorn. It's the 10th house. It's right at the top of your chart. So, another thing. Too much to sum up. But the whole point about not writing down means they didn't leave receipts for trivial purchases. They didn't leave, you know, clipboards with their names on. They weren't careless. They had the future in mind with every step. So they didn't carve. They didn't want skeletons all over the place because they didn't want the future to look like a graveyard. But they also didn't want to write and carve into stone because they didn't want the future to be schizophrenic. They didn't want 1,000 languages on the same ruin. They didn't want, you know, the people 100 years from now to get confused with a different language. So you could say this is pre-Tower of Babel. This is, you know, whatever you want to say, but they were very careful about their receipts. They didn't leave, leave no trace. With death, they left no trace, and with language and writing and carving, they left no trace. Now, you could say this is a stretch, and, you know, this is what they need to be true for their other theories to be true, like, you know, where are all the bodies? Where are all the anatomically correct bodies all across the world 50 million years ago? Well, they burned them all. So that is a little bit of a convenient, argument. But that being said, there's also truth to it.
Sacrifices, man, you burn all the
There's-
bodies. You look at
yeah,
all the
there's-
Vikings and they're burning on the boats of the bodies.
There's a whole way that you could, I could make a slideshow saying this is possible, but I want to stress that they didn't write and carve in stone. And in Exodus, it says, do not lift your tool upon the stone. If you're going to build me an altar, if you're going to worship the Lord, don't do so with hewn stone. And no steps on the pyramid. So using some of these indicators in Exodus, you can see how this tradition made it all the way down to,
The moment you cut the stone, you've defiled it.
Yeah, so we see these traditions popping up in the Middle East. And to my point about receipts and, evidence of life, evidence of habitation, they didn't carve because they didn't want the world to be littered with senseless carvings. You ever go to, I've never been to Egypt, but you ever been to Egypt and you see one of these sites that's been occupied by multiple people and they're carving over each other's carvings and, they're refacing people's work, ancient people, so that they have space to work, it can
Or
get
like
confusing.
you drive through like Oregon Trail and you just see like all these pioneers have graffitied the heck out of these nice mountains and everything. You're like, dude,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah, so they didn't want the world to be a messy place with bodies or with, scribblings all over. So they didn't carve with hewn stone, okay? And there's some other things there. But when you see them, when you see modern history picking up in the Middle East, when you see modern history picking up in the Fertile Crescent, what we're actually seeing is one of the first deviations from Bock traditions. And they start writing down and carving stone for the most trivial of affairs. We know almost everything we know from Sumeria today. Look it up. Because we have all their receipts for casual purchases. Sumeria, who we think are coming out of the Stone Age, are actually very preoccupied with keeping track of every little insignificant purchase. And that's some of the greatest evidence we have of them, that they even existed, is their receipts scattered all across the landscape. You find little clay tablet receipts. So this would not have flown under the Bock Saga. They were opposed to debt, to money making, money changing. They were opposed to all these things. So as soon as we see them popping up, we can identify that as a deviation from the Bock tradition. And the Bock gives a little bit of an explanation for this, the Bock Saga, that the Etruscans went to the Mediterranean and spread the runes. I'm a little foggy, but they explain that either the Sumerians came prior to them, or they didn't implement the language, the runic language, so they're on cuneiform. And cuneiform may not have been an authorized writing system from the top down, like from the headquarters in Udenma. And you see that these people are obsessed with debt, obsessed with some forms of black magic. They clearly are polar. The Sumerians, let's just look at the progenitors of Semitic culture and the peoples. You have the Assyrians, the Assyrians. You have the Scythians, Scythi, the people of the Scythe, the bringers of agriculture, the horse riders, the archers, the chariot riders, all of this clearly from the North Pole, the beards, the agriculture. How is it that the nomadic civilization is also the people who spread agriculture everywhere? How is it that the people who never stayed put were the ones who brought agriculture to all of Eurasia, much of it? Well, they came from the North Pole. They're let out of the gate with everything they needed from the get-go. And as soon as they got where they were going, you see civilization, boom, take a shift. Sumeria, let's just look at the words. This is not in the Bock Saga, by the way. Sumeria. What did the Finnish call themselves? The Suomi. Suomeria. in both places, they get their name for the fact that they're swampy. In Finnish, Suomi means swampy. The Suomi, Sumeria, which is filled with reeds, filled with bogs, filled with swamps. You know, it's mostly desert, but Suomi. Then you have, let's see, give me some other ones. Assyrian, Scythian,
Sumer, Canaan.
Sumer, Suomi, Canaanite. Who knows? Well, here we never
Semitic.
we never ironed out the Dan and Sven thing.
Okay.
According to the Bock Saga, English, German, Danish, Austrian, parts of the Italian, Spanish, you know.
Russian.
No, not the Russian. Hang on. This is the Dan line.
Okay.
The Dan line of the Bock Saga, which is the first deviation, I believe. Dan came first, then Sven.
I think so.
I could be off on that. I admit I don't know for sure. But the Dan line was Danish. That's where we get Dan, you know. Danish, Dutch, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, France, Spain, Italy. Everything kind of hugging Germany is the Dan line. These are very warlike. These people have a great capacity for conquering. These are some of the, most violent and capable of violence, powers came from the Dan line. The Sven line is also a deviation from the original root race of white Northern Europeans, which are only a product of the Ice Age, according to the Bock Saga, we've got to say. According to the Bock Saga, all people were brown on this planet. Not black, not white. Somewhere in the middle. I like to say Eric Bana from Troy and his wife. I had a vision one time, and I saw what I think were these people, and they looked like Eric Bana and his wife from Troy.
Fair enough, but the point also is like Madame Blavatsky's Lemuria thing, like a lot of different stories, and it seems like this is probably true that people weren't, that they were probably something in between like that, yeah.
And then you have the fact. Well, back to the Sven. Dan line we've established. The Sven line is the Irish. So the Irish are a different people altogether. And the Irish and the Scottish are different people altogether from the English and the Germans and the Saxons who inhabit the western part of the British Isles, southwestern part of the British Isles. And the Irish and the Scots are a little bit different. Now, they are actually closer related to the Swedes, the Icelandic, the Norwegian, the Hebrides, these other little scatterings of kind of Viking-like people. The Irish and the Scottish are closer to those people, and these are the Sven line. In fact, Sweden, Sveden, comes from Sven. In fact, in Finnish, I think if you say you're Swedish, you say svensk. Or if you say, dansk, you're Dan, Finn, and Sven. And you see these words coming up a lot, especially Finn and Dan. But that's the Dan line. The Dan line seems to have seized military control of the whole world. Now, that's a generalization, but the way that they use eagle iconography shows them to be much more warlike. And you'll see these people having, more circumcision. The Sven line, however, seems to be more peaceful. Now, say what you want, the Irish have never really colonized anyone. They don't have that impulse. Right, the Scottish have tried, but they never really got it together like the English did and whipped their subjects into total subjugation. The Irish, the Scottish, the Scandinavian people have done much less invading, much less colonizing. And I cringe when people say colonize. Like, I'm not one of these anti-colonizers. Colonization's a little good here and there, okay? I believe in the right of conquest. But the whole colonization thing, it shows if a people is warlike or not. The Sven line we can infer, is a little bit less warlike than the Dan line. Now, the Pirouette family is said to be the least warlike, the most traditional, and the Dan and Sven line are outcroppings of the Pirouette or the, Osser highest family line. You've got the Dan and the Sven are kind of like the bastard lines. They're not supposed to be there. They're not, they're extra children who didn't have roles and sought kingdoms for themselves. So that's the Dan and Sven, summary of the Dan and Sven, how there's 3 different groups of white people on the planet, not just one.
That's fascinating, man. And it's something that you touched on early in this, before things went crazy, were something about Ior Bock and how he had a connection to the king of Finland. And I had never heard any of that before, that he was actually, because I have a friend that's from Finland, and I actually asked him kind of about this Bock Saga. He was saying that this is something that they don't know anything about. He says if you ask the average person in Finland, they have no fucking idea about any of this stuff. It's interesting to me. Just that, do you think that some of this is kind of being swept under the rug for your average Finn, or?
Yeah, let's also address, whenever I tell these stories to people, like the guy we purchased the bookstore from, this wise old wizard from Hungary who came to America under communism, opened up this great, shop, amassed all this stuff. He never heard of the Bock Saga. He's Hungarian. They're supposed to be the closest to the Finns linguistically, He never heard of it. But I want to just give something else here. What does it matter? Why does it matter? I'm standing in Lake Worth, Florida right now. Lake Worth, Florida is the highest concentration of Finnish people outside of Finland. Okay, it's right where the Gulf Stream comes closest to mainland America. So Ior Bock was very, he stressed the importance of the Gulf Stream and how it flowed from the Gulf of Mexico to Finland. And this is what kept Finland alive through the Ice Age, was a steady stream of warm water. This is a fact, by the way. I don't even know if Ior had access to these facts back then, with the internet or whatever, but he only died in 2011, I guess. What you see is the Gulf Stream does, in fact, come from the Gulf of Mexico, and it intelligently and consistently flows up the coast of eastern Florida, Atlantic coast of Florida, and then goes out into the Atlantic, juts across the Atlantic, past the Mid-Atlantic Ridge to Northern Europe. One stream goes towards Portugal, one stream goes, snakes into the English Channel. It sneaks up around into Scandinavia, up into the Gulf of Finland, and then there its warmth is received in Helsinki. Now, how Helsinki stayed alive during the Ice Age, like I said, depends on this warm water. Now, if you want proof of the Finnish, memory of this, the subconscious memory, I'm with you, Nate. It's not really on the conscious. It's not on the tongue or the ears of the everyday Finn. They don't really talk about this unless they met Ior. I've never been to Finland. Could be wrong. I have a friend, Sari, who lives in the area. A shit ton of Finns live in this area. She comes up and helps me with language some of the time, right? So the Finns in Florida are living this truth. They come to the point where the Gulf Stream hits mainland America, and they've settled here. Now, that was mostly after World War II, but there's got to be some ancient precedent for that. Where did Edgar Cayce say Atlantis was? Bimini. I'm right across the river, essentially, from Bimini right here. So what these people were saying, the Gulf Stream plays a crucial role in almost every rendition of the Atlantis myth. So the Gulf Stream comes here. There's a shit ton of Finns here. I think this bookstore, landed here for a reason. Our Hungarian guy, like I said, he never heard of the Bock Saga, but I've told him about it a little bit. He respects it. Now, to the point about Finns not knowing much themselves, the modern Finn is not exactly the Hyperborean, chieftain he was thousands of years ago. The Hun came through Europe, right? The predecessors to the Hun, two people came after the Hun, armed war parties from Eastern Europe, from Asia, ultimately, swept across Europe and brought a total influx, new wave of genetics. And when you look at Finnish people today, they have a big dose of these Asian, Mongoloidal, Eskimo, traits, due in part to all the Asian people that were left over there. Hungary's down here.
I've got some Finnish people in my family, and they have the biggest heads I've ever seen. They have
yes. Ooh, Isaac, you're bringing up a great point. Wonderful point, Nate. You're bringing up something that Isaac Taylor pretty much made a career off of. We've all heard of phrenology, right? Probably the head measuring, considered racist today. Well, there's truth to it. The Isaac Taylor, I'd love to finish up that last point I was making, but Isaac Taylor was a toponymist who says the names of places are, hold great meaning. And it's like a mythological truth can be extracted from every name of every place. Isaac Taylor, look him up, very smart guy. He made a study off of head shapes, and he came to the conclusion that the Finns were the progenitors of all Northern Europeans and, white people on the planet based off of head shape. He said the original Finns, this is the point I was getting to, the original Finns were like Swedes or, your Vikings. They were tall, essentially Hyperborean supermen. Now, the Finns of today are, like I said, largely those Eskimo or Sami, visitors, settlers from East Asia. And you see a big drop in height. You see more squinty eyes. You see more flat features on the face and very pin straight hair. In Finland is the blondest place in the world. Finland is the blondest country in the world. That's another thing that corroborates their story as laying claim to the birthplace of the white race. They have the blondest, most blonde hair in the world. Now, this is a whole controversy because Ireland has, you can debate this, has the most red hair in the world and curly. So red hair tends to come along with a curly gene. The gene in Finland is blonde and pin straight, which only comes about when they've mixed a tiny little bit with East Asians. You ever see East Asians? Who's done a Punnett Square or whatever? East Asians have a very dominant gene for pin straight hair, thin hair, and it even overrides, black people genes. Asian, it's like a rock, paper, scissors. Black people genes override white people genes, but Asian people genes override black people genes. But white people genes override Asian genes. So it's like a piggybacking, like recycle. So the Finns were exposed to a hefty dose of East Asian DNA not too recently. 1100, 1300, maybe right after the Catholics were done kicking them around. Or initially with that initial kill-off that Ior claims, Hungarians are down here and Finland's up here, right? They are supposed to be linked culturally and linguistically. They might dispute that, but the general, academic story is that the Hun and the like came from East Asia, and there was originally a Baltic, Hungarian, Finnic ethnic group. Maybe sometimes they call it Turkic, but I reject that. That went from Finland down to Eastern Europe, down to the Black Sea, down even to the Middle East. And Ior talks about this chain of like bed and breakfasts. Like Ior says, his family was in charge of all the roadhouses, like the hostels along the way from Finland to the Holy Land. And I might be mixing that up a little bit, but they traveled that from the North Pole to the Middle East pretty easily back then. And what happened was, Genghis Khan or someone before him or after him, the Huns, Asiatic peoples, or at least they might have been being led by someone else, but a big group of East Asian people broke through kind of those Ural mountain strip that separates East, Asia from Eastern Europe, and these horseback Asiatic people broke through. The Khans, whatever you want to call them, Khans, Huns, the terms are kind of misapplied, and it might not have been one group of people, but these Asiatic people burst through and separated the Hungarians down here and the Finns up here, and they burst through, essentially made it as far as Germany. That's why as late as World War II, they were calling Germans Huns, because the Hun made it that far. They weren't all Asian, but they had Asians with them. That's why in Germany to this day, you don't see that much red hair. You see a lot of blonde, you don't see as much red. In Ireland, which never received even a little bit of this Hun invasion, there's almost no East Asian genetics whatsoever in Ireland. And therefore, they're still very pure, very original, very white, very, whatever that source Bock family was, they're perhaps the best representation of it today, because they didn't have that East Asian infusion. Now, they might have been infused with some other people, like Native Americans, a little bit of African in Ireland. There's probably a little mix of that, but they didn't get any East Asian, so that's why you see the red hair and the curls. But in Finland, it's the blondest place in the world. In Ireland, it's the reddest place in the world. So remember, this is not in the Bock Saga, all of that. Like I said, I'm filling in some blanks here, but that's a question that could be polished better. If we all put some time to it, is why is there red hair in Ireland, blonde hair in Finland, and each of these places kind of claim to be the whitest place on earth. But yeah,
that is fascinating, man. I do like to think about in Exertus, I don't know if you're still there or not. I like to go back to the European hairy man. I like to think about the giants and the rulers, because I had also heard, and I don't know how verified this is, but I'd heard a story about Genghis Khan, that he actually was a bit of a giant and that he had red hair. And I don't know. It's just really fascinating to me, all of that. But
interesting, the idea that there's different. I mean, the idea of gene flow is really interesting, because earlier we were talking about mules and the idea that some species can't interbreed, right? And so a lot of people will be like, with phrenology, they're like, oh, well, humans, are they one species or are they not one species? And the answer is interesting, because we clearly have gene flow between all these different kinds of humans, but there's definitely at least something very different about Floriensis from Heidelbergensis, from Neanderthal, from Sapien erectus, etc. So, I mean, clearly there's a lot more going on with the human condition than we realized. And yet it's also like far more tied together than to say it's, a bunch of separate things.
Can I share my screen? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Yep.
Wait,
Thank
it's
you.
not hentai, is it? I'm just kidding.
No, but no, don't worry. I X'd out all my tabs here. Don't
One of the
worry.
nice things about
Chris.
Longo is I never have to worry about like certain things with him. He's quite the civilized man.
I don't know. I'm pretty vanilla, believe it or not. Thomas might not agree.
You're
but
like
I'm pretty.
Tahitian French vanilla, though, bro. You're like, there's some flavor there.
Isaac Taylor is who we're looking at here. Okay, this has nothing to do with the Bock Saga, as far as I know. Ior never really gives any sources outside of, hey, my family taught me this. Now, I don't think his family gave him every single thing he ever said. He was no doubt addressing things that were going on in the world with the Bock Saga as like a codex. And I think he was definitely taking a swing at issues and trying to give an explanation using the Bock Saga that his, family hadn't directly instructed him in. Now, that being said, he definitely read things like Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis. He knew which points to contend. You had to know what people were saying about Atlantis first before you can kind of correct the misconceptions, right? Now, that being said, he doesn't give many sources, but I would wager he had never even heard of Isaac Taylor. In fact, we might not have ever heard of Isaac Taylor if someone hadn't made a Wikipedia about him, right? I mean, I've never read about Isaac Taylor up until now, but I'm not that old and haven't read that many books. Maybe someone out there has heard of Isaac Taylor. Andreas?
Yeah, I think I have, but I don't know a lot about him. I mean, I obviously, I've seen some of this, but I don't know that much about it.
Yeah. So let's just read here. It says he's a priest. I remember him being listed as a
Or a Calvinist or something.
toponymist right here. Toponymist. That's
he's an Anglican though, right? He's not a Catholic. Just
right. That's the important part, though, is toponymist.
Mhm.
Ior Bock, if you want to classify him as anything, was a toponymist. People say he's a folk etymologist. That's true too, but he was a toponymist. Hey, the name of that means this. Hey, that name of this place that everyone, this word everyone uses all the time, well, the meaning actually comes from here. Or the meaning actually means this according to my native language. Even though this is Egypt, a city in Egypt, let's take it and strip it down and give it a meaning in Finland, in Finnish. That's kind of what Ior was doing, or what his family was instructing him in. Isaac Taylor approached that from his own angle. Really, Isaac Taylor came to study not only the language, but then he went to studying the skull shapes, like I was saying. He came to the conclusion that the Finns were the original Northern Europeans, white people, whatever you want to say. They were the original. And this was true because they had tall skeletons, so they were taller. Their heads,
or anthropology.
their heads were bigger and wider and taller, the Finns. Then the Celts descended from the Finns and also are tall, have tall heads and big heads. But then the Anglo-Saxon, or you could say the Dan line, had a thin head, or the Scandinavian, more Germanic bloodlines take on a thin head, a long head, right? Thinner. And then he goes on to say, well, other people have a short head and a small head. So these must be furthest removed from the original, which was a tall, full, large skull. Yeah, we might be able to read it here.
Yeah, maybe you want to increase the size a little bit.
Can I?
Yeah, if you press Command plus, or if you
Command plus?
yeah.
No way. You're like a computer.
I'm like a
for
half and
dummies,
half.
but-
I'm like an outside cat that I can go indoors.
Zerdus knows all.
So here you go. he focused on writing and language. All kind of the building blocks to the Bock Saga are kind of here. He's looking at the Etruscans, comparing it to runes. Here, let's just read a little bit. Here's a quote in this paragraph. It would seem that the Goths, who then occupied the region between the southern coast of the Baltic and the upper waters of the Dnieper. How do you say that, Andreas? You know that one, I bet. Dnieper. Taylor argued in a subsequent paper, they must have obtained a knowledge of the art of writing from the merchants of Olbia and other Greek colonies on the Euxine, who, according to Herodotus, voyaged 40 days' journey to the north by the great trade route of Dnieper. Now, is he coming to a little bit of a different conclusion? Maybe, but he's establishing the ancient Greeks were well aware of the Scandinavians, the Hyperboreans. There's
They said they descended from them, right?
Yes, there's a trading of language from one to the other.
Mythology.
Isaac Taylor was pretty on the money, approaching.
Like, if you want to find like stories about goats and apes doing weird stuff, I'm pretty sure Rome and Pompeii will do you justice. Like, you don't have to, like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, the thing is, this culture merger and bleeding of culture together is so much more than people are acknowledging, and then it just disappears kind of because it goes underground, it becomes esoteric, but the church is definitely destroying and building on top of the ruins of this culture, right? Look at the Basques.
Yeah,
it's talking about.
Let's read this little paragraph here. In 1890, Taylor published Origin of the Aryans, in which he proposed the Roundhead theory, in which he argued that European Russia was the homeland of all of the Indo-European peoples. Wow. In opposition to the assertion of Max Mueller, who had argued for Central Asia, which they argued to this day. They want every white person to have come out of Central Asia. That's the academic paradigm right now, is all white people, blue-eyed people, come from a single ancestor near the Black Sea. But here, Taylor believed that the Celts, tall stature, round heads, a branch of the ancient Finns, were the only true Aryans, who had Aryanized the Iberians, short stature, long heads, the Scandinavians, tall stature, long heads, and the Ligurians, short stature, round heads. In regards to the origin of the Basques, Taylor believed that they were direct descendants of the Etruscans. Taylor's theories on the Etruscans, though now obsolete, caused great interest at the time that they were presented. He believed that the Etruscan language belonged to the Altaic language group. That's, not Mediterranean, I don't believe. That's more like Turkey, correct? Going more towards north. Am I right on that, Andreas? Altaic language group.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, like, and now in the last 1,000 years, there's been more influences that have changed things. But yeah, the Altaic is also, again, a linguistic group, more like the Skin. Like, people are acknowledging them by their technology more than just by their blood. This is a learned,
So he believed that the Etruscan language belonged to the Altaic language group, and that Etruscan mythology was fundamental to that presented in the Kalevala, the great Finnish epic. In his Names and Their Histories, Taylor presented an impressive survey of local, foreign, and national names, though many of his toponymic theories have been discounted.
Well, I mean, yeah, so like Altaic... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just last sentence. He laid the groundwork for future research in this then new discipline.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I wouldn't say that Altaic has been accepted by all of mainstream science, but I definitely wouldn't say it's been debunked, right? Like, so the Altaic theory is basically, I would say, accepted on some levels. You know, the idea that the Basque language has the same grammar as the Japanese grammar, these are major parts of this, like the Japonic language and the Turkic language and the Mongolian language are connected, and that the Etruscans before the Romans had the same culture. I mean, this is, again, like Tartaria research really jives on that whole thing too. But the Altaic belief that the Turkic language was changed essentially in the last 200 years through Arabic influence and everything like that. There's more and more proof to that. So people might have said the Altaic theory wasn't, proven in like the 1920s, but as we start to read Old Turkic from like the 18th century, even just 100 years earlier, I mean, it's completely different. It's far more similar. And, again, the Basque situation, there's no other explanation. Like, there's no one else is even trying to explain why the Basques and the Japanese are connected at all. But,
Hell
yeah.
Well, what else is there? There's a ton to the Bock Saga that, we can't all fit in here. But, and I was hoping we'd have some other, we were missing some experts, some great contributors here who would have filled in a lot of gaps.
Andy would have been our wonderful expert here that would have really just dropped some. Yeah.
Well, we can do a two-parter. I mean, the fact that Andy's not well, we'll get him back.
You were dropping some super fucking interesting stuff. Yeah, I wish Andy could have made it tonight.
We'll do it. We'll do a solid again. I think the thing is, this is good because a lot of people aren't nearly as familiar with this stuff. I mean, half of the audience is like, wait, what? Until about 30, 40 minutes in, we had to explain more and more. So, I mean, this is a primer. And, I think also it's really useful to think about these theories. And, like the fact that you're getting presented from all of these different angles, Thomas Longo included, gives you different perspectives where you can choose what you want to think about these things. But I would agree that the idea should be looking for truth, like sifting through dirt for gold, and you should try to get something out of everything, not just discard it when you find one thing that is, you can be critical about or you don't understand about it.
Call it silly.
Well, I think we need to figure out what psychologically it means to like not understand something and then therefore to reject it as silly. But like realistically, I'm silly. I'm a very silly person. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm all for silly. That doesn't bother me. If someone called me silly, I would be like, thank you, probably like Willy Wonka. So, I mean, it's like, it's in the particular of like what it is that we're looking for about the Bock Saga, which like, yeah, I get it. Like same with Juan, I get it. There's things about this that seem shocking on the cover. Never judge a book by its cover. Try to find out what it is beneath it. And again, I've seen so many other shocking things. There's so much more shocking that it seems like, hey, this is interesting that this is related to these things that have been shielded from people, told that they should be afraid of. Don't look into it. While, again, we've talked about this, the elite are doing far stranger things than anything that we've talked about tonight, right?
Yeah, and they seem to be keeping up with the black magic rituals.
Yeah,
I think that was the interesting thing that I kind of wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, was the separation, like what happened with the white magic, what separated, what started the black magic, yeah, I mean, there's just so many fascinating little topics that we could talk about with that, but yeah, we're pushing on 3 hours here. I don't know how much you guys want to keep going.
I got all night. I can hit the treadmill. I got plenty of time.
I could take a break because I got to take care of my dad and stuff. I think maybe if I tune out, but like if you guys want to keep going, otherwise we could do.
No, that's okay.
We should reschedule though with Andy. He's going to be okay in a few days, and I think that'd be nice because then it's not just like, like making you do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Chad. I do have vegan stamina here. Yeah.
Vegan stamina is real, by the way.
Yeah. Yep. But awfully quiet, Thomas, over here. I hope our feelings aren't hurt beyond repair. You all good?
No.
Is there anything left to say, really, when we're past the cum guzzling part? You're awfully quiet. It's also very, ironic at its core to think that a member of a society that clearly is engaged in homoerotic activity would ridicule a saga, a story like this, which doesn't promote homoerotic activity. but they also don't cover it up and pretend they don't do it like the Masons do. So it's suspect and funny that you, in your own homoerotic death cult, would ridicule such a beautiful, life-sustaining, life-exalting, fertility-worshipping, white magic doctrine like the Bock Saga. You don't have to agree with it all the way. But I give it just as much chance as I give these Masonic books. And guess what? You get a lot more from the Bock Saga than you do from the Masonry. With a lot less red tape, with a lot less, tribulation, with a lot less sucking dudes off. Believe it or not, you actually get more of that in Masonry. Maybe you haven't gone that far. Well, that's all I got to say. For real, though, I hope.
Doctor?
Sorry?
Is the lecture over, Doctor? Am I allowed to ask a question?
I'm really excited for all of our anyone who's new to this, like any new guest tonight. I just want to say welcome.
I get it.
Welcome to this happy, wonderful, magic place. Welcome to Disneyland.
I just want to note. No, please finish.
I could go a couple more minutes here. I think I do have more interesting things to say, but go for it.
I just wanted to note that I came here with questions and not arguments. Everything that I've said so far has been about the Bock Saga and just my disbelief in utopia. Not once did I really say anything other than I thought that the concept of utopia was silly. So the fact that it devolved into weird ad hominem stuff, I'm not about that. I think that we are having a good time. And I guess my impression and my entire fascination with Bock Saga was that I had heard about it for like a year, maybe 2 years. And no one ever brought up the weird semen cum autofellatio stuff. And it was weird. Like, why would someone bury the lead of the one thing that actually makes it seem somewhat interesting?
It's not buried. It's not buried. You're just making it seem like that. If you listen to the Bock Saga, it's like the third sentence.
Right, but I was the first person to actually say autofellatio or semen or cum in the first hour of this. After you and Andreas gave your intros to it, not a single time does that come up.
Yeah, it might be hot on your mind. It's not hot on my mind. There's a lot greater gold to be had from the story.
I don't think you can skip over it. I think it's so inherent.
No one's skipping over it. See, again, you're just pulling stuff out of your pocket as if it's has grounds for submission into an argument. It doesn't. You're wrong.
I'm trying to talk about ideas, and you keep talking about like me and what I'm doing.
Well, let's take it one point at a time. Slow it down a little.
So let's talk about castles. Here's another question. It sounds maybe really pedantic, but the concept was that during the Paradise times, they built castles not for defense, but for like these rituals and for honoring. And again, this might sound very pedantic, but if a bunch of peasants or lower caste people are building a castle, are they all happy about the manual labor that they're going through, which the upper castes aren't? And furthermore, just one extra little tidbit on there. If two lower caste guys are carrying a big piece of stone for the castle, and one stumbles and accidentally trips and it crushes the guy behind him, his leg gets crushed. Does he feel and this is hypothetical, you're not on the spot to like...
Yeah, a lot of hypotheticals here. Yeah, a lot of...
Okay, well let me at least finish the hypothetical. So the two peasants, one drops the rock on the other. Does that guy never get mad? They never get into like a Hatfield and McCoy type of dispute? Should I rephrase that?
I mean, it doesn't really lead anywhere.
The utopian aspect of society where nobody fought.
Yeah, it's particularly triggering for you, but it's nothing that I really wrestle with, and you should just sit with it and ponder the philosophy a little harder. Don't just expect it like a handout from a person who runs a more well-researched channel than you.
Well, I'm asking a question for the discussion aspect, not because I'm looking for like a piecemeal answer that I can go. No one cares about the answer. I think they care about the discussion.
You don't get one answer. You're entitled. You're the exact type of occultist truther that I detest. You feel entitled to the truth on a lunch plate, and you don't want to do any of the legwork. You want to present yourself as a intellectual and yes, a skeptic, a critic, yes, academically rigorous. No, you're just flinging shit at a wall and making it seem like you're seeking the truth. I know it. You know it. And to your point earlier about ad hominem, I don't pull any punches. You tell me I'm sidestepping, you're as good as dead to me because that's not the truth, and I treated you with nothing but dignity and respect. Now,
I
when
felt it.
okay, well, I don't do the passive aggressive BS and I'm back here and I'm remaining calm. No, I'm a man. I'll look you in the face and tell you if I got a problem with you. And you seem to think you have the moral high ground by sitting back and just saying, oh, you did this to me. You did this. Damn right I did this to you. You're a fat fucking Freemason loser. You're trying to degrade my YouTube channel. You're not trying to present any new information. You're
I
not
didn't even
trying
know
to
you were
build.
streaming on your channel, and I didn't even know you were a thing, to be honest. I knew that you did a tour at the Bock Tower. and
Oh,
that's
you didn't
it.
know I was a thing. Okay, well, now we're just dealing with a dishonest person.
I didn't know you had like a lot. Would you have 50,000 followers, and that's like a big deal? Sorry,
This
I didn't
FaceTime
mean to
video.
interrupt the Dr. Longo lecture on Bock Saga. I thought we were here for open discussion.
You're asking me, aren't you? You're not presenting anything. You're asking me. It seems like mostly.
No, I came here with questions only. So
No, you came here with a passive aggressive attitude from the get-go, and I see through that. And I'm not afraid to call it out. I'm not afraid to present myself as the more aggressive one. Believe it or not, that's what comes along with honesty. I don't care how I come off. I said what I meant to you. I'd say it to your face. I would have said it if you brought any of these concerns up at my meetup, which I treated you more than respectfully at. You even commented that I treated you well and made you feel welcomed. Okay? And that still holds true today, but you slighted me, and I don't like that. And it is very much of the character which I gave you the benefit of the doubt of, being a overweight Freemason. And I stand by that. Case closed.
I appreciate
90
the supercut that this is going to
90 nails in the coffin.
I appreciate the Fat Mason supercut this is going to give me. I hope it'll go viral.
Whatever.
Let's do our plugs and let's get the fuck out of here. Dr. Longo, where can our audience find you? This is an interesting first for our audience here.
Welcome to the Reality Czars, by the way. It's nice to meet
Thank
you.
you for joining us, man.
I'm having a blast.
I do
Nate,
appreciate it, brother.
hey, Nate, thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for giving me a chance. And I wasn't planning on a debate. Happy to do it. And whatever. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Do you have a website? Anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah, old World, Florida. I've never asked for a subscriber in my life. Paranoid American here begs on his knees. Please subscribe. Please donate to the Patreon. Please buy the all this. You know, all my stuff. You can say I have a hot head. You can say I have a big ego. I put it all out for free, and I like telling the truth. There we go. I'll rest on that. Old World, Florida, and subscribe if you want. Unsubscribe if you want. I could care less. I'm going to tell the truth nonetheless and call out barbecue addicted, truth hating, parasite riddled, Kanye West wannabe losers like this. Mark my words. Yeah, you know, passive aggressive BS. I see right through it. I'm not passive aggressive. There you go.
Andreas, are you still here, brother? Thomas, you got any
might be taking care of his dad. Yeah, so I appreciate the shout out, Dr. Longo, and if anyone wants to support my work, I do have a brand new Kickstarter project that's kicking off tomorrow. It's at adultoccult.com. It's where esoterica meets erotica. It is a fully adult, like completely explicit, illustrated.
Yeah, you're literally the Rabbi Shmuley of truth. You're literally the Rabbi Shmuley of truth community. I mean, how do you not see this?
Can I use that on the back of one of my books?
You can use whatever you want. It's all you're going to be doing for a week. I can tell. Is I got to edit this video of Dr. Longo creaming me in front of everyone. I mean, you got wrecked, dude. You got wrecked, flat out roasted, and you're sitting here like a brisket. The last 40 minutes of our talk, you couldn't even say anything. But sure, shill your cheap garbage some more. I'm actually pretty offended by it. Keep holding the same stage as this lowlife who's going to sell you garbage comics. At least I don't rely on AI trash on my channel. Thank you. Okay. No, shill your shit some more. Come on.
Yeah, no, Dr. Longo's absolutely right. This is actually cheap. It's one of the first times that we're going to be having bundle discounts. So if you get all 4 of the adult cult, and it's actually called Illuminati.
Yeah. Rabbi Shmuley of the Truth Movement. Literally looks like him if he ate 1 million more hot dogs. You look like Rabbi Shmuley. You look like Rabbi Shmuley pretending to be Kanye West on Halloween.
If you get all 4 issues, there'll be a combo discount, and we're also going to be giving away a whole pack of pinup stickers. There's like a Baphomet sticker. There's a QAnon shaman pinup sticker. There's a whole slew of them. There's going to be 6 different ones. And in addition to the 4 different issues, this is 80 unique pages. Each of these covers is going to have a more explicit variant version. So if you want to get the regular cover, they'll be like $15. If you want to get the explicit, they'll be $20. And then there'll be like an ultra explicit that might even have a foil backing and extra bookmarks and all kinds of cool like doodads. And those will probably be around $30. And I want to just give a shout out. We will reintroduce the $1,500 tier. That was literally called the Masonic Piggy tier, the Masonic Piggy Grifter tier. And if you get the Masonic Piggy Grifter tier, you'll basically get one of everything Paranoid American has
doing my
ever
work
made.
for me here. Doing my work for me, really.
You'll get
just name the next one, Fat Barbecue Slob Addicted to Porn on My Mom's Couch. How about you just name the next one that?
So the $1,500 tier, you'll get one copy of everything that we've ever done. Every coloring book, sticker sheet, playset, now and forever. So basically, from now until I die from a heart attack from eating ribs, you'll get every single comic that we produce from here until out. So that's the $1,500 tier. And we did have a bunch of people that signed up for that one last time. Shout out my homie Matt Rife. Shout out Juan from the 101 podcast for making this kind of happen in the background. And thank you for everyone that backed the Chosen One. It hit over 400% of our initial funding goal. So we've got a lot more Chosen One coming, and we were already kind of figuring out what podcasters are going to make cameos in the future episodes. Some of them are literally going to get killed by a giant piece of shit falling from the sky. So you'll have to buy issue 3, issue 4 when they come out soon. So that's me. Find me at paranoidamerican.com, and again, adultoccult.com for the new adult-only series that's dropping tomorrow on Kickstarter.
Riveting.
And everybody go to Zertis.com as well. Love you, Andreas. You guys can hit us up at realityzars@gmail.com for love mail, hate mail, all the fun stuff. If you're within an hour of Portland, Oregon, I always say I'll come and grab a beer with any of my audience. I love you guys. This has been a very interesting, very fun podcast. One that I will not forget. Any last words, gentlemen?
I went easy on you too. I didn't even talk about being bald or anything like that, or one hand behind my back on this one, pretty much.
Final words, just drop in the comments if you appreciated the part where multiple people were having a discussion, or the part where Dr. Longo just droned on for an hour with no pause for questions.
All right. Real intelligent.
See you guys. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming to the Reality Czars. Adultoccult.com.
Yeah, roasted. Yeah, roasted, man. Have your mom put you in the cool bathtub to cool you off, dude.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Roasted.
Reality stars. We're reality stars. You know who we are. We're reality stars. Daytime stars.
If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to leave a 5-star rating for Reality Zers wherever you are listening to this podcast. If you like the music and visuals, visit